I freak up room, no seat biting, never bites. Fast for the dribbling in the girls down with the guys. Fit now to see black, you right, great fight. OMG, Mac 4, Robin C, Gallon Neck Night. Hot Stove Talk, Robin C, bringing the hype. EC's alive, plus trust under those in my city life. Right? Queens got the dreams united. On the rag, Trump out, bring me stack. Night and under that chocolate flag. Smack that home out the park. Fuck the deafening black. Side game time, Robin CP time to ignite. Under NYC skies, we fight the good fight. Remains cheer in the orange, we unite. Mets forever. I'm fit to be in sight. Mets riding high. Energy like a live wire. Queen City chance. Passion never tires. Grand slam dreams and paces focus fast. Holding it steady cause we know we gonna last. We the kings of the field, time to ignite. Under NYC skies, we fight the good fight. Remain cheer in the orange, we unite. Mets forever, our victory in sight. All hearts ignite like NYC stars. Robin CP, guiding even through scars. Queens got the glow, city anthem flows.
What's up, Mets fans? Welcome back to episode 29 of Mets Hot Stove, right here on both of our channels and on X. Hopefully everybody's enjoying. Most of this country is hit in the East Coast, or most of the South is getting hit with snow, including myself. So I feel like I'm home again very quickly with the snow. But hopefully everybody is safe, healthy, and ready to go. And of course, Chris said it before we went live. There's a lot to talk about, but not a lot to talk about. It's just in a very weird way. There's so much to talk about with so much little happening with the New York Mets, and we're definitely going to get into that. Chris, how you doing, buddy?
Oh, I'm doing well. Again, we're patiently waiting for some Mets moves. We're just sitting here and waiting. I think that's the name of the game, is just waiting this offseason out. It's unfortunate where you got to watch the Dodgers make the moves that, they're making, and the rest of the league has to keep up. And I'm sure we'll talk about the Dodgers and the luxury tax for the Mets moving forward and what's going to happen the rest of this offseason. Because again, I do think the numbers right now play a big role in what we are going to see unfold for the Mets. Or lack thereof for the rest of the offseason. Salute to everybody in the chat. Again, we appreciate you being here, trying to bring you all entertaining content while not much is going on. But again, it just feels like, especially with the Alonso situation, there's just so much to talk about. Again, smash the thumbs up button on both of our channels. Subscribe to both channels. I try to release videos on a daily basis. Sometimes if I can't do it daily, I'll do every other day. Dropped a video today talking about Marte and Brett Baty. If you missed it, links in my description right now in this live stream. Right in the description. Check it out after the stream. But other than that, let's go Mets. Let's have a good stream.
There you go. And once again, guys, I did it on Monday with the hot stove. The super chat thing me and Chris talked about. It makes it easier because, again, there's over 150 people in my stream with X as well. Yep. And it's just easier to actually find comments when, you guys can have great comments, great questions, and we might miss them. And we have no idea, if we, because we were looking at each other, we're trying to look at the chat. But again, you look down and then you look back up at the chat. It's almost impossible to try to find certain comments from you guys. And we try to get to everybody we possibly can. And it kind of worked when I did the solo show, when you couldn't make it, Chris. It worked out. I think it was like 5 or 6 people that did super chats. And again, it's not about the price or anything like that, or the money. It's just easier to figure out because we got 2 channels going. We got combined 300, 400, 500 people in here. It's hard to keep track of all of it.
And it automatically stars your comment too when you super chat. So we have it on a separate list that we can go back to. Yep.
Correct. And they highlight it, and it actually puts it in a separate file, basically a bracket where we can easily just click on it, and everything's there. All the super chats are there. So that's what we're going to do with the rapid fire. Of course, we're going to ask each other a question, and then we're going to finish up with all your super chats on my channel and Chris's channel. And because I have the official stream link, it will pop up on my screen, all the super chats from my channel and Chris's channel. So if you have a question, opinion, comment, of course, we're going to get to certain comments that we see when we look down, but the ones that we miss, please guys, just do the super chat. Again, doesn't matter, whatever you want to give, you give. That's totally up to you guys. It's just easier for us to find some actual comments because sometimes it can be very difficult to do so. And again, we have about 200-300 people all together at the moment just now, and we just started. So we're just trying to make it easier for everybody to be heard. And that's the whole point of this, because we're not doing this talking to ourselves for fun. We got you guys here that are supporting us, and we're trying to get you involved as much as possible on the show. So, Chris, here we are again. It is January 22nd. I mean, we're basically 3 weeks away until the first official workout, and less than a month for the first pitchers and catchers and full workout, and a little over a month when the first spring training game happens, and the Mets roster isn't filled out yet, right? Technically, they don't have a first baseman. Their bullpen is not finished yet. The Pete Alonso situation is, who the hell knows, but we'll definitely talk about that. We still got a bench to worry about a little bit. There's still a lot of conversation. There was another article yesterday in regards that the Mets still feel comfortable with Vientos playing first base. And, I think that's one of the topics that we can talk about when it comes to Bregman or internally, but we'll definitely get to that. So we need to talk about the Mets before we talk about anything. And I think me and Chris agree on this. This is why this is the number one topic. Are the Mets very focused on this payroll, on that third luxury tax, because of the fact that, they're at one of the highest brackets and percentages of paying the overall tax and the percentages? And Chris sent me a bunch of stuff. I actually found something as well that makes it a little bit easier to break down. I'm not going to bore you with all these numbers, but are the Mets trying to fill a roster without continuing to pay that immense tax and that percentage as well, and if they're trying to reset? Because it takes 1 year to reset, and that's something that is not really talked about. Just because you have Steve Cohen doesn't mean that you just got to keep on spending basically $50 to $1 every time you're going over a just $1 basically. So it's a lot of money, and we know Steve Cohen can afford it. We know the Dodgers can afford it. But the overall thoughts, and Chris did say, let me let Chris say, because I gotta go searching. But talk about the Mets luxury tax payroll at the moment, and do you think it's a concern, or at least a thought process or a plan to them to try to avoid getting hit with that another tax, because they're already 3 seasons in with basically over that biggest tax threshold?
Yeah, so the luxury tax is not going to reset this year. They're already past it. This is going to be the 3rd season in a row that they're past it. Honestly, it might be the 4th season. I had to go look at the 2022 numbers to see if it's the 4th season, but they're not going to reset it this year. That's already long far gone. Now, the Mets are basically paying the most that they can pay, and the Dodgers are also doing the same thing with their, payroll and their roster right now. So for those of you who don't know, this is the first year in the collective bargaining agreement, I believe, that there are 4 luxury tax thresholds. This is the first time, because it's usually only 3. This year, there's a 4th one, and it's $60 million more than what the luxury tax is. So whatever the luxury tax is plus $60 million equates to $301 million. Now, I was doing some research on Fangraphs and trying to do the math on where the Mets are at in their luxury tax payroll. And again, give or take a couple $1 million, they're right around $293 million. So keep in mind the $301 million figure, that's the marker that we have to pay attention to. That's about $8 million away. So whatever moves the Mets make, there could be a lateral move to free up some of the roster payroll allocations. Starling Marte's a big contract. I mean, McNeil's probably going to be here, but again, if they could move McNeil in a situation, that would erase a big chunk of money. But essentially what happens is that the Mets are already paying the most tax that they can because they're over the luxury tax. But they're also paying an additional, right? They're paying 50% for every $1 million they're going over the luxury tax. And now that they're approaching $301 million, they're going to pay an additional 60% if they cross $301 million. Right now, in surcharges, they're paying 45%.
Yep.
I don't know if it's the goal of Steve Cohen at this point to penny pinch and not go into that extra 15%. because the difference between 45% and 60% when you're already paying 50% in penalties is negligible at this point. It really is. It's negligible. And so it's all funny how it all works. And honestly, when we talk about the Dodgers, because we do have to talk about the Dodgers in the stream and what they're doing, because again, it's just absolutely ridiculous. But again, you cannot fault them for doing what they're doing. But they're doing the same thing and they're paying the same penalties that the Mets are right now. Yeah. Difference is that Steve Cohen himself is not a corporation like the Guggenheim Group is.
Correct.
And that's a huge differential there between these two organizations. And it helps a lot. It really does. So at the end of the day, you know, right now what we're looking at with $293 million allocated, I understand there's a lot of math figures. I understand we're throwing a lot at you all. So if you're not keeping up, it's quite okay. It's taking me probably like an hour to sit down and just look at this in hopes of trying to explain it to you all in an efficient manner. Right now, they're paying a 45% surcharge in addition to already 50% penalty on the payroll. And if they go up to $301 million, which is again, $8 million away, they're going to pay 60%, a 60% surcharge. So I don't know if the goal is to not go up to that $301 million figure. With the Mets needs right here on this stream on YouTube, my title is the Mets need another arm and they need another bat. You are not getting there without going over that $301 million figure. You're not even going to get another reliever without going over that $301 million figure. So I think that we've been both echoing this for quite some time, Rob. The Mets are going over unless they're just simply done this offseason, which could be the case too. I don't know.
Well, that's the concerning part, because all we heard from this organization, from the owner, from David Stearns last year, when they were trying to convince everybody that this is a transition year. Yes, of course, we're going to try to make the playoffs with what we're trying to do by not spending a lot of money and bringing in a lot of prove-it type deals and a couple of guys on contract years. They were trying to. They were setting themselves up for the trade deadline. Let's be completely honest about that. We all know they were trying to set up for the trade deadline and giving themselves options if they weren't good enough. And I'm not going to say unfortunately, but fortunately, they were in a position where they were close enough to a playoff spot. And Stearns had to add. He added with basically not giving major prospects away, which, again, I always think that is the funniest and stupidest thing a GM can do, is that when your team has a chance to win, and regardless, if you decide to become a buyer, you're telling yourself, you're telling your team, the players, and your fan base that you think you can win. Because if that's not the case, if you think that we're just going to make a cute run in the postseason and end up in the NLCS and just die, when you could have made a move to maybe combat that, or move or two to combat that, you didn't truly believe in this team. And why didn't you just sell to get even more prospects? And maybe you had more opportunities to trade this offseason for a pitcher or a bat. There's a lot of different ways to look at it. And I continue to talk about why I get frustrated with this organization. This has nothing to do with an owner. This has nothing to do with a GM. This has something to do with the Mets history. Regardless of who's running things, it seems like it's the same trend all the time. Once they have a run when they have a good season and they have a run, the following year, it seems like they half-ass an offseason or a deadline or both. And it becomes a factor. And then we talk about, we have to come up with gimmicks, and we have to come up with, well, Minaya is an ace now. Well, look what we got. Like, we're trying to make ourselves believe that this team is better than what they are. And this falls on the hands right now of David Stearns and specifically Steve Cohen. Because again, we don't know, we're not behind closed doors. We don't know if Steve Cohen is saying, listen, I'm not going over 301. We don't know that. But it's almost impossible to think that, because let's say the Mets are done. They wipe their hands, right? They're going to put Mauricio or Acuna at third base. They're going to put McNeil at second base. They're going to put Vientos at first base. And your bullpen, you got AJ Minter. Woohoo, congratulations. We got a bullpen now. And Pete Alonso's not on this team. So do I agree that this team is better than last year? You can't necessarily say it is or is not, because the Mets bullpen on paper looks better than it did last year. Right? The rotation I think it's a huge question mark. I think that's the biggest concern. Go figure, right? That was the same thing that we talked about last year in our season preview. And what was the issue? What was the biggest issue? It ended up being rotation. Today is what we're saying is they're done. They're done with the bullpen. They're done with signing anybody. Let's just say this is the roster. Maybe they'll bring in, a couple of minor leaguers or minor league invites and stuff like that. Maybe somebody in the farm system will shock the world and they'll make the team, something like that. Maybe something crazy like that happens. But let's say what I said happens. Is the lineup better than last year if you replace Alonso with Juan Soto? You can say, sure, right?
Easily, yes.
Correct, right? The lineup is better. Like, it's a fact, right? You're talking about Lindor coming off basically an MVP season, right? It was Lindor and Vientos the whole year, right? Even if you have bounce back years from not good seasons from Nimmo and Alvarez, let's say if they take another step up and Nimmo stays healthy for most of the year and he hits similar to what he's done in the years that he's been good. Let's say Alvarez ticks up to a 20 home run guy again, gets that average up a little bit. Well, that's already better than last year, right? Why did Jose Iglesias come up? Because McNeil sucked, right? Why did Harrison Bader get benched for Tyrone Taylor? Because he sucked, right? We put this in we didn't put this in perspective. How bad the lineup was after Lindor and Vientos. Like, Nimmo was terrible. They didn't know where to put him in the lineup. Alonso was a killer in this lineup for the entire season. And there was really nothing to look. What was this lineup doing, right? It was Jose Iglesias coming out of nowhere that sparked the team. Tyrone Taylor took Bader's spot. Marte was hurt for most of the year, but when he came back, he played a little bit better, Chris. And this is the frustrating part that I don't understand. You make Game 6 of the NLCS, right? Whatever you want to say, if it's luck, if it's the grace of God doing this, whatever it is, the fact of the matter is you did get there. Regardless of how it happened, you got there, right? The world champions have had one of the best off seasons after a championship probably in baseball history. And they're doing that. And they're getting better. And that's the team that you lost to, and you were 2 games from a World Series. Why the Mets don't think that they need to do more is absolutely frustrating to me, because my biggest gripe with this whole thing is the whole history of the organization, because it's a trend. Go back any year the Mets made a run in the playoffs or made the World Series and obviously lost, and the following year they quote unquote made the fans happy with maybe signing the guy that everybody wanted and didn't do enough, and go into the season with too many question marks where everybody's going to say, well, we have a trade deadline. But we know the trade deadline is not as easy as it once was because of that extra wild card. The Mets were, 5-6 games out at the trade deadline when they made moves? Look how many teams were involved in that aspect.
So, okay. My question to you is that, and then that's all fine and good. I think we've hit on that point. I have heard you, like, in terms of trying to make the team better. Like, that's understood. As it pertains to the topic, the Mets payroll and luxury tax, do you at least agree at this point with what the Dodgers are doing right now? This is not something that the Dodgers just, for lack of a better term, pulled out of their asses. This has been a decade in the making for the Dodgers to get to this point.
Agree.
Do you think it's smart financially for the future of this team? I'm not even talking about 10 years down the road. I'm talking about next year, the year after that, because if you take a look at the actual payroll allocations of this team, even with Juan Soto in the doors, the payroll is dwindling. And again, they go back down to $206 million, and then the CBA luxury tax goes up. Do you think it's smart for the Mets to even try to go dollar for dollar with the Dodgers and knowing what they're doing over there?
Well, I'm not saying you have to go dollar for dollar. It's just that the Mets have holes and you have to fill them.
Agreed. I agree with you.
They're not filling them, and that's the issue. It's not even about the who or what or where of how much. It's that they're not filling the roles in particular at all. Like they haven't. Like what have they done? They brought back Shomania. They're praying for Kodai Senga to be healthy. They basically replaced Severino with Montaz. They're trying to reliever at starter, and David Peterson is a guy that deserves to get a chance in the rotation because of what he did last year. But that's not filling holes. That is. I'm not saying that's not filling holes. It is filling holes, but they could have done a little bit better in the market of free agency. Like they spent, I think, what was it, around $55-60 million on the rotation for this year alone in total money. And it's a lot of subpar guys and guys that haven't started since they were basically rookies in baseball. Like it's ridiculous to me. I feel like it's not about going one up with the Dodgers, because as good as the Dodgers roster was and all the money they spent, the $1 billion they spent last year, the Mets were 2 games away against them from making the World Series. So again, it's baseball. You can beat anybody on any given day. Short series, long 7-game series, it doesn't matter. It takes, a few moments to beat a better team, right? Teams that are worse win all the time. So it's not just about that. It's just that I don't even focus on what the Dodgers are doing, right? They're going to win the division. They're probably going to win over 100 games. It doesn't matter when you get to the playoffs. You all start at 0. But with the Braves not doing nothing, and this is what's frustrating, with the Braves not doing basically nothing this year.
Nobody's doing anything around the league minus the Dodgers, it seems like.
But that's what I'm saying. But just for the NL East, because that is how mostly you're going to get to the playoffs. Because if it's situated like the Central, who knows what the Central is going to be? I don't think the Central is going to be very good once again. But, there can always be a surprise team like the Tigers that show up. And, now there's another team involved in the wild card, right? Arizona like the West is going to kill each other, right? That's what happened last year. The Arizona Diamondbacks fell apart because they couldn't beat anybody in the West at the end of the season, right? The Central was kind of lost cause, and the East was the 3 teams made the playoffs. So what was the biggest issue is what the East is doing right now. The Phillies, right, they traded for Luzardo. They didn't do much. But you could say they're a similar team from last year with a little bit more depth in the rotation, which is probably one of the better rotations other than the Dodgers in baseball. I think you could say just by names. And the Braves haven't done nothing. So you're trying to catch the Phillies. The Phillies won the division last year. The Braves are going to be healthy to start the season. You got to get closer to those guys so you don't have to worry about fighting for a third wild card when you're still having a payroll $300 million. Like, that's what I don't get. Like, the Mets force themselves, and we can, if they want to talk about not going over, and this is the roster they're going with the season, then the Nimmo contract was terrible. Right?
Because that's speculation. We don't know if they're actually done, though, Rob. I think that's.
I understand that, but you brought up the question, so I'm just trying to like.
Oh, if they're done, okay, you're okay. If they're done, I got it.
And a couple of years ago, when he gave Nimmo that massive contract, maybe you shouldn't have done that, right? If you was, here's the other thing.
That wasn't Stearns, by the way, just for everybody to let them know.
I'm not blaming Stearns. I'm just blaming the organization as a whole, right? Steve Cohen was the owner with that. So, right? Let's just say the money you spend is allowing you to control your farm system and still have the assets available. If you're not going to spend the money, you got to trade the assets to get better, right? And that's still going to add to payroll. So that's the issue. It seems like you can't be $10 million away or $8 million away from that 301 mark in the luxury tax and tell me that how are you going to get better? Like, even if it's a David Robertson is your next guy and that's the last guy you get in the bullpen, that's still going to cost you around $7 to $10 million. So even if you decide to make a trade, maybe you can throw McNeil or Marte in there, but you still got to pay basically half the salary, if not more, just to have the team take them along with prospects. But again, Stearns has not moved the prospects. He's the GM or president of baseball ops for 2 years now. Hasn't traded the top 10 prospect. Not even a top 10, 15 prospect for that matter. So if he's not willing to trade prospects and you're not willing to spend above market value, because this is the problem with Stearns, it's been talked about a lot. The market value is where he's, besides Juan Soto, that didn't count. Other than that, every guy he got or trying to get, he never went above market value. And that concerns me because if you're only going to look at market value and say, this is what I'm giving you, somebody else is going to get them. And somebody else is going to get richer. This is why the Dodgers have jumped in on multiple guys, because the other teams are looking at market value and saying, well, this is your value. We're not trying to give you more than market value. Why do you think Tanner Scott went to the Dodgers? You heard that story about the Cubs, right?
Yeah, I mean, they didn't want to go an extra $4 million. I heard that, yeah.
Tanner Scott wanted to be a Cub. The guy wanted to be a Cub, and the Cubs couldn't find $4 million more above market value to land him. So we went to the Dodgers because the Dodgers did it. Like, it's things like that, and it's the small decisions like that that can cost you getting a player, and now goes to your competition, and the rich get richer, and that's the issue. Like, you're trying to be better than the team's number one in your division, who hasn't really done nothing this year, and you have to fight when you get if and when you get to the playoffs with the Dodgers. Like, are we going to talk about the same thing we did last year? Oh, the rotation wasn't good enough. Oh, this wasn't good enough. That wasn't good enough. It's a real issue. And that's what I'm saying. Like, either you're going to trade your assets or spend the money. You can't do either and expect Mets fans to be silent and happy about this. And I do say one thing, Chris, the Amazing Mets Day is on Saturday, where they're going to reveal their new road jerseys, which I can care less. They can wear pink for all I care. Right? Mets fans, if you're going to that Amazing Mets Day, I wish I was going. Voice your damn opinions, because Steve Cohen's going to be there, David Stern's going to be there, players going to be there. Voice your opinion, because they do Q&As. Voice your concern and your disgust with this offseason. Juan Soto isn't enough. We all understand that. Like, you have to voice your opinion. And I wouldn't be shocked, Chris, after that Saturday, that Amazing Mets Day, which is awesome. I went the first time they did it. It's awesome. Pete Alonso would be signed by the New York Mets, because they're going to hear the frustration of Met fans directly. And I think that's a big deal. But you either got to do one or the other, Chris. Spend the money or trade your assets to bring in better players to help your roster. They seem like they don't want to do both either.
I agree with you, although I do think that, listen, and I'm going to go out on a limb here. Nothing has suggested this, but I do think that there is a reason why David Stearns hasn't been willing to trade the prospects, is that I think that they are waiting for a particular situation to play itself out. I don't know who it's going to be for. I don't know if it's
that's
what was that?
They're waiting for the market to fall.
No, that could be too. That could be too. But again, at the end of the day, if we're making these decisions for the simple fact of taking these guys away from the Dodgers, let's just go. And this is what I'm getting from that statement is that, let's overpay for a guy for the simple fact of the Dodgers not getting him. I mean, they're going to do what they're going to do regardless, to be honest with you. I don't think that's any way to run an organization, because again, at that point, that falls in line with trying to go dollar for dollar with the Dodgers, and the Mets nor any other team in this league is equipped or ready to do that. None.
That's fine. But again, the Mets had a hole in the bullpen, right? They still have a hole in the bullpen. Tanner Scott was a perfect fit, along with AJ Minter, if you really wanted to do that. Like it's not like.
But they didn't. They didn't want to do that.
But because of market value, that's the problem. Because Tanner Scott is better than AJ Minter. I like the AJ Minter move. Like,
of course, he's better than AJ Minter. Yes, I agree.
Right? But again, why did they get Minter over Scott? Because of the years and money. That's market value. They're looking for the best value on the market. Now, maybe Stearns is the biggest genius and he makes us all look stupid come the end of the season. But again, if it doesn't end in a championship, it's a failure, right? You don't have Steve Cohen as an owner. You don't have one of the better guys, GM/president of baseball ops, to run your team. And you don't win a World Series. That's an unsuccessful season. And I keep on talking about how many more core years do you have with Francisco Lindor? 3 or 4. Nimmo, same thing. If you bring back Alonso, 3 or 4. Like, you got to win within those years. You're spending a ton of money on those guys to not win. It makes no sense. It really makes no sense. Because right now, they're not doing either. They're not doing enough. And again, let's say they do a little bit more. Let's say they bring back Pete Alonso. Everybody be excited about that. Mets fans will go goo goo gaga, but realize that the roster is still an issue. let's say they bring back either Stanek or D-Rob or Bolt. And one more, let's say one more right arm in the bullpen. Let's say it's Stanek, just to make, have an argument, somewhat of an argument here, right? That's their bullpen. The rotation is what it is, right? Are you confident in that team?
Much more than what they're at right now, yeah. I'm going into this season, to be honest with you, I think every Mets fan and every team around this league, every fan base, not the fan base of the Dodgers, because they're exempt from this, but every other fan base in this league is going into this season knowing that their team on paper is not going to be as good as the Dodgers. It's just not feasible. It's not attainable. So again, I agree with what you said before. Don't worry about the Dodgers. Let's plug and fill the Mets holes that they have right now currently present on this roster, which is why I said they need another arm objectively into this rotation, which is why I said they need another bat. That's what they need. And again, I mean, I hear you loud and clear about market value, continuously wanting to stay at market value, not going over. I understand that. But again, at the end of the day, I think that solving this problem of trying to compete with the team out in LA, because again, at the end of the day, we can say we're not worried about the Dodgers. But I know that it's not about that. But at the end of the day, do you think that there is a reason that teams around the league are not willing to go above and beyond for these players for a certain reason? Because of what the Dodgers are doing out there in LA.
Well, yeah, I mean, I guess.
Which sucks to say, but again, at the end of the day,
Mets have to act like every other team other than the Dodgers. Like
they don't.
Like that's right. Met fans are complaining that some of them that you're trying to work the market because Pete Alonso has no market, right? I get that point, but there's other guys out there that like you didn't want to give Teoscar Hernandez another year. Clearly, you wanted him. Jock Peterson, you didn't want to give a few extra $1 million. It wasn't years, extra $1 million. Two guys that you went after. So you're clearly going after the outfield help, right? Santander went to the Blue Jays. Profar is out there. I'd be shocked if the Mets don't get Profar. But if they don't get Profar, what is going to be the argument then? Oh, they didn't want to give a few $3-4 million more, or Profar got a 2-year deal and the Mets weren't willing to do it. Like you're putting yourself behind the wall here, right? It's not about competing with the Dodgers at all, dollar for dollar. You ain't gonna win that battle. I know that. But the holes you could have got Tanner Scott, but you got Minter. You might get Profar, but you could have had Anthony Santander. Like it's just like you're going for the lesser player because you want to save a little bit of money and keep that market value where you see it as for certain players or all players. And it could cost you at the end, because if the Mets don't get Pete Alonso, they are absolutely screwed. I'm telling you that right now. And I'm not the biggest Pete Alonso fan, but what else is out there? Unless they go and pivot to Alex Bregman. But if we're talking about market value, they're definitely not getting Alex Bregman. So you're going to bring Fientos to first base and tell me that Acuna or Mauricio or somebody else internally is going to play third base, and you're going to tell me that, we're going to be a better team than last year? I mean, yeah, we might be, because it hasn't happened yet. I can't predict the future. But I just feel like it's a weird way. It's a weird plan, and it could work out for the best for sure. But it looks like it has to be a lot of luck for that to happen. And I don't want to be done with gimmicks and luck and hope.
I will say this before we talk about what the Mets can do for the rest of the offseason, because again, I don't think that they're done. I truly believe that they are going to get another bat. And I think that they will get a bullpen arm. But what I will say, and I agree with you 100% on the free agency, if it takes a couple of extra $1 million, and if you really want that guy, and if that's the differential, I'm saying if, and I'm speaking about it in a hypothetical term, I'm not saying that this is objectively what's been happening, but if that's the case, then that makes me scratch my head 100%. But just trading prospects for the sake of trading prospects at this point is not following what the Dodgers did to get to where they're at today. The Dodgers did everything by the book, and they went through the growing pains for the better part of a decade, got deep into the playoffs a couple times, choked it away, lost a few World Series before they finally got one in that COVID year, right? But no one was still convinced. That was a weird year, and no one was convinced, and they finally got a real one not a real one, because again, it's a real one to their fans. But you know what I'm saying? In this past season in 2024, but they have a humongous mix of internally grown prospects and everyday players, and also external free agents. The Mets don't have that. That first part that I just said, those players, they don't really have that. They have that in Pete Alonso and Brandon Nimmo, right? But like, again, they're at the age that they're at. They've got Mark Vientos all of a sudden making that statement, but they're not ready. And this is objective. And this is what's so frustrating too.
Because last year they said they were going for it. They exactly said that. They said it word for word.
Who said that? Scherzer said that. Who said that? Who said? Steve Cohen said that? Find me the article where Steve Cohen said that.
Go back next year. He said it in the interview, along with David Stearns, by the way, when everybody was wondering what the hell the Mets were doing. And they said, they didn't directly say it, but they said that 2025 is a better. They said this year was going to be a transition year. And they indirectly said 2025 was the year they were going to go for it. Clearly, with the Juan Soto signing, you were going for it. That was your first big move of the offseason. That was the start. And everybody got excited because of it. Like, uh-oh, here we come. And then it was basically, half-ass so far, in my opinion.
Listen, I mean, again, I hear the frustrations. I understand it. But what team is not going to tell you that they're not going to go for it? Like, what team is gonna directly tell you? What was that?
The Mets told you they weren't going for it last year, even though we had other opinions when we did our our total wins. But
I don't think that came from them, though. That didn't come from them. David Stearns always said that he wanted to be he always wanted to be a playoff contender. He always wanted to take this team to the playoffs.
And it was an evaluation year. He said that in that same sentence.
He did 100%, but it's always an evaluation year.
I think that no, I'm sorry. You make Game 6 to the NLCS. This year should be an evaluation year. If this is another evaluation year, why do you sign Juan Soto?
Because you want to go after the top premier players. I mean, that's just another piece that you bring into the puzzle. I mean, the guy's 26 years old. He's a phenom. You've got him for the next 5 years at least. And there's no way he's opting out of that contract. There's no chance.
She's not. But
there's no chance.
I think they fell into a spot where I think they had a plan, and maybe whatever the plan was, it seemed like the plan kind of they skewed on their plan a little bit this year. I feel like they have. I don't know if it was one player they really wanted and it kind of didn't work out and they adjusted their plan. And, then articles came out, the Mets were willing to move Vientos to first base. They're looking internally. Like, maybe that's putting pressure on Alonso and maybe other free agents. But the guys that are leaving or that the Mets were in on didn't get much more than quote-unquote market value that Stearns and the Mets are putting on their players, right? It's not like Teoscar Hernandez got a 5-year deal and the Mets offered 2. Or Jock Peterson got a 3-year deal and the Mets offered 2. Like it was a little bit more money and 1 more year. Like they're losing out on players that they clearly wanted based on minimal addition to money or years. It's not a huge number. Like, I'm not saying for if the Blue Jays offer Pete Alonso 5 years, I don't want the Mets to do 5 years for Pete Alonso. But
so you wanted the Mets to go 5 years for Santander because that's what the Blue Jays gave him.
No way. Nah, they overpaid, obviously. They clearly overpaid. But again, we don't know if the Mets were ever in on Anthony Santander, right? There was a couple of rumors, but the guys that we know they were in on, right? We know they were in on Hernandez. They offered him a 2-year deal. Jock Peterson, the same thing. And they're technically in on Pete Alonso when they offered him a deal, right? You can't lose Pete Alonso over 1 more year and a few $1 million. Because if you do, you look really bad on your own guy. Like, I'm not the biggest Pete Alonso fan. Everybody knows that. But you can't lose Pete Alonso, especially when guys are coming off the board at this point, and tell me you're going to replace him with Profar. Like, it doesn't make anybody excited. I'm sorry.
Listen, at the end of the day, this is what I'll say is that the front office, and I've been saying this from day one, they don't care what the fans want. And I know that it's going to upset a lot of fans, and I know that the fans should be, the first and foremost, most important thing in a lot of Mets, fans' eyes. there's going to be a lot of things that this front office does and already has done when we talk about David Stearns' tenure, that's going to rile us up. That's going to make us question everything that they've got going on. And it's just a simple fact of the matter. If you think that I'm not frustrated right now, especially, looking what the Dodgers are doing, looking at where we're supposed to be, looking how we're following up the Juan Soto signing, I don't think it's a grade F or a grade D follow-up from Juan Soto. I think it's respectable, but it's not, to your point, exactly what everyone had envisioned when Jeff Passan was saying the Mets are prepared to, go full throttle. It hasn't been just
How
yet.
is Jeff Passan so wrong?
You don't know if he's wrong yet. The offseason isn't really done. You don't know you don't know he's wrong yet.
What is going to be? Let's say right now, what is going to make you give the Mets a grade A of an offseason? Because right now I'm on a C. Like, I'm clearly on a C.
I'd probably go C plus. I'm right there with you. I think that can easily get bumped up by adding at least a bullpen arm and bringing back Pete Alonso. If they bring me Stanek or Robertson and they go ahead and bring back Pete Alonso, I'm prepared to give them a solid B plus. I think that goes from C plus to B plus, and that's my grade.
Yeah. I guess I would have to give like a B minus because again, I think they completely botched the rotation. I truly believe that. Now, I'm not saying these guys can't have bounce back years, some of them, and Clay Holmes can be, Seth Lugo or Michael King, right? I mean, maybe they will be, and maybe the lab is so good that they're gonna make these guys better. And it's factual. Again, it's only one season with this, and if it happens again, I'll shut my mouth for the rest of the time when it comes to the pitching lab. But I just don't get it. I don't know if their plan was this. I feel like they pivoted. They pivoted from a plan that they had because one or two guys that they thought they were going to land did not land, and now they have to make up some other plan because that plan that they had just blew up in their face.
I will say my opinion on this offseason is that the Mets, in every move that they were going after, controlled their own destiny. They controlled their own destiny with Teoscar Hernandez. Maybe he wanted to go back to LA, but they had their own viewpoint. And if they wanted to go to 3 years, they would have. There's nothing that the Mets have done or have not done this offseason that they didn't actively decide on. So I don't think it's a plan that they had originally and then pivoted. I think it's been methodical. And again, everything the Mets have done has been within their own power. They decided not to go the extra couple of years or extra couple of $1 million for Jock Peterson. You remember when we were having that, not argument, but it was sort of a debate whether the Mets were going to go after Tanner Scott or not. And I said, listen, there's no chance they're going to give him a 4-year deal after they just signed AJ Minter. I think you had a little bit of hope for that, but I was like, there's no chance they're doing that. If they really wanted to go get Tanner Scott and give him 4 years, they could have, and they would have, but they didn't want to do it. Now, I can't provide the answers to any one of us in this chat or you or me or myself and why they didn't want to do that. But I really do think that everything is methodical and everything is to their own doing, right? They were in on multiple guys. They couldn't get him for whatever reason. They didn't want to get him for whatever reason. And it is what it is at the end of the day. I do truly think, though, at the end of the day, that they're going to go out and fill at least 2 more of these holes. I'm less confident. Are you still confident they're going to get an arm in the rotation? Because I'm less confident in that. I think it's 1 more bat or 1 more bullpen arm, and then we ride into the season. But everybody was so up in arms about it being an evaluation year last offseason, and look where the Mets got. And if you're asking me, and I see a couple of questions in the chat all the way up, if this Mets roster as it currently stands is better on paper than it was last season, I'm going to tell you 100% yes. And that's going to be, without a doubt, if they go back and get Pete Alonso, which I still think is on the table for the New York Mets. I will continue to say that. I think that without a doubt, it's better. The bullpen, they can stand still just with the addition of AJ Minter. Mm-hmm. And it'd be a better bullpen on paper than what they had going into the season last season.
I even brought that up. We even brought that up even before the Minter move, that the bullpen is already starting to look good just based on the guys that the Mets already have on the roster. And Minter makes it better. Sure, absolutely.
But again, we can talk about hypotheticals and the actual Mets, thought process and philosophy. Let's talk about Mets and Pete Alonso. Let's talk about some bullpen options here for the next couple topics. Because again, there are still guys out there for the taking. I mean, Alonso's one guy, and I know that your thumbnail has Alex Bregman. My live chat poll has an actual question of who Mets fans think is going to make the better impact for this lineup if they are in on either of these guys. We've heard less smoke around Bregman. I'm going to remain true to the fact that I think that Alonso in this lineup makes a more meaningful contribution. And again, now that we know that Alonso is willing to take a 3-year deal that's been open and out in the public for quite some time, I think that that's the most logical route because Bregman is holding true to 6 years. I don't think that zero bones and David Stearns' body is going to go 6 years for any player left on this market, let alone Alex Bregman, who had a little bit of a down year compared to his standards back in 2024, statistically. So I think Pete Alonso is still that likely option. I mean, you've talked about Profar. I've talked about Profar. We're going to talk about Profar again. Mm-hmm. But, man, I mean, Pete Alonso. And this is crazy that he's still on the market. But you know what that signifies is that he doesn't have a competitive offer elsewhere.
Every first baseman went off the board other than Pete Alonso because, again, it's not just the Mets. It's not just me saying it. Teams don't believe in Pete Alonso over the age of 30. Now, I'm not one to talk about age and worry about him at 35, 36 years old, or even 33, 34 years old. I'm not even worried about that. Like, I think they go too far with age sometimes. I truly, like, Freddie Freeman is 35 years old, and he had one of his best seasons last year. Like, and look what he did in the playoffs. Like, I think guys can still, especially with the DH now, can still be a guy. Like, can Alonso be a DH in 4 years? Absolutely he can, right? But there is a reason why teams are shying away from Pete Alonso. And again, I'm not blaming the Mets for giving what they offered because why offer more when nobody else gave a contract to Pete Alonso? So the Pete Alonso situation is, I thought there would be at least, I was shocked that the Cubs are not more involved. We know why the Mariners are not involved. They have to shed payroll before that happens. And it doesn't seem like the Mariners are doing anything at this point. And they're not really, rushing to make sure they can be involved in the Pete Alonso talks. And I thought Pete Alonso and Scott Boras was hoping the Cubs or the Mariners would be involved because that is clearly the two destinations where it makes a lot of sense for Pete Alonso. We talked about it for 2 years now about the Cubs wanting them for years. Like, if the Cubs are not willing to give $4 million to Tanner Scott, they're not even going with the Mets offer Pete Alonso. It's clearly not happening. And with Seattle, they got to get rid of one of the pitchers to shed payroll until that happens. And it might be Pete Alonso might be off the board by that happens. So I still believe Pete Alonso is going to be a New York Met. But impactfully, I think the argument can be had either way when it comes to Alonso or Bregman. I think they both can be impactful for the Mets because you have that guy along with Juan Soto. Like, I think Juan Soto is going to make any of these guys better than what they were last year. And it's hard to say that Pete Alonso could have a worse season than he did last year, even though average-wise it was a worse season. Run production is a problem with Pete Alonso throughout his career. I still trust Bregman more in bigger spots just based on career. And again, you also got to make the playoffs first. And I feel like Pete Alonso hasn't done enough during the season, especially with the numbers that you gave a couple of months ago with the Pete Alonso stats, not just the season, but career-wise, it is an issue. Like, you can't be one of the problems consistently when you really need time, when you really need one of your big bats to step up. Again, argument either way. When it comes to Alonso, I think there's no other choice for him. I don't think Toronto is going to give him, because let me just ask you this. I guess they asked the question because I don't believe Pete Alonso would do this, but if it's a few million, say if it's 3 years from Toronto, do you believe that Pete Alonso will go to Toronto for the similar 3 years for, let's say, $75 million? I
mean, what room does Toronto have unless they're getting rid of Vlad? I mean, I'm not buying that he's going to third base.
He's willing to move to third base. I don't agree with that.
I don't see it. I don't see Pete Alonso going over there and being alongside Santander and Vlad. I don't think that's an option. They could shock everybody and do that. And hope that Vlad just signs the extension and just have Pete in the doors regardless. I mean, they are a desperate team. Again, at the end of the day, I've told you all it's very hard to compete with a desperate team, which is what the Toronto Blue Jays are. But what they could do is just go ahead and just sign Pete, try their best to sign an extension with Vlad. And if they're not getting a good feeling, they're like, all right, well, we already got Pete, so we might as well just go trade Vlad for a haul. That's plausible.
That's very plausible.
But I mean, I honestly think if Toronto was offering anything competitive, I think he would have already been there. I think that it's gotten to the point of the offseason where Pete Alonso, if he gets any offer on the table, he's just going to go there. So that tells me, without actually getting confirmation whether Toronto has an offer to him on the table right now, because we know the Mets do. What is it, 3 years? Opt-outs included for 23 and a half.
Yeah.
Somewhere around there. $23.5 million AAV. Let's just call it an even $70 million, whatever. And then there was also a report from Will Salmon saying that they were willing to go a couple of $1 million extra. Maybe you can bump that up to 3 for 75 for Pete, $25 million AAV. Yeah. I mean, if I'm Pete Alonso at that point, I mean, what other team, where is he going after, with that offer?
That's the issue. Like I don't agree. I don't think Toronto is gonna, even though they're a desperate team, they probably know that they would probably have to go to at least 5 years, because I think the Mets would be willing to go 4 years when they don't have to at the moment because there's no competition.
Right.
I think they would go 4 years for whatever. Let's say if the average value is $25 million a year, so 4 for 100. Let's say it's that. I think they'd be willing to do that, but I don't think when you don't have to, why even put it out there that you will? Right? Going over a few, saying you would go a few $1 million more is kind of a little bit of a, hey, we still got you here money-wise. I think he would go to Toronto if they offered him a 5-year deal. A 4-year deal, even a 5-year deal, Pete Alonso's calling the Mets to get a final counter offer or none at all. We know this, right? He's already talked about it. Boris has talked about it. So, I don't know what the holdup is. Either Pete Alonso, I don't understand the logic in any agent or player at this point where you clearly don't have much of a market at all. Go to Toronto and says, give me a best offer. What's so hard about that? You put pressure on the team and you figure out what's going on in your life when it comes to offers. Say, Toronto, do you want me? Yes or no? Yes. What is your offer? Give me an offer so I can send it back to the Mets. And if they don't match it, I'm going to be a Toronto Blue Jay. I don't see what's so hard about this. They make it so that's why there needs to be a sign-in period, because this is just a waste of time. We've been talking about Pete Alonso for almost 2 months now. And what has changed? Every team chose another first baseman over him, except for the Mets at this point. And the Cubs and Mariners are kind of saying, hey, we need you, but we can't do you. We can't do anything for you. It's I just don't understand the logic when it comes to Toronto. I mean, Toronto, I don't truly believe Toronto's real with Pete Alonso. I just think they want to put some pressure on Vladimir Guerrero Jr. That's what I think it is. I think they're trying to force Vlad to take a little bit less money in their extension. And again, if it doesn't start with a 4, he's not signing. And he came out and said he's not playing third base. So you're going to have a disgruntled face of your franchise in Vladimir Guerrero Jr. if you sign Pete Alonso. You really think they want that? Because then teams are going to know you're going to have to trade him. And that's when you lose value for him.
Yeah, so, I think Pete Alonso to Toronto is bad news for their pursuit of Vlad. So they have to be 100% sure that they're willing to lose out on Vlad by getting Pete. And you talk about the report that was 3 for 68 to 70. I mean, I really do think that was leaked by the Mets. I don't think that was leaked by the Pete Alonso and Boris. I think that was leaked by the Mets because, again, if Pete Alonso wants to go to Toronto and they get a hold of what the actual AAV that they're competing with is, they're not going to go up to 27, 28 off the bat. No. They're more likely to go 24, 25 just to do enough to beat the Mets offer.
Which the Mets will probably counter and do the same thing.
Exactly. Because they showed this already per Will Salmon to go up that far. You know what I mean?
And you know what? You will really see then if Pete Alonso wants to be a New York Met, if that happens.
Correct. And also Robert Murray, I mean, let's not, get it twisted. Over the weekend, he also said that Pete Alonso and the Mets are still talking. So even if Pete
did a video on that, yeah.
Right. And even if Pete Alonso is going to talk to other teams, they are going to come back to the Mets with a final offer, and the Mets can decide at that point. Now, when we talk about first base, I'm sure we'll talk about maybe first base when it comes to Jurickson Profar. I don't have any problems with Vientos moving to first base if that's the actual goal, but I do have a problem with Brett Baty getting reps on opening day to start at third base. That's what I have a problem with. And even in Ronnie Mauricio too, not doubting him as a player, but doubting his health in terms of the start of the season. So if you're telling me you're going internal, right, with the first base option and Mark Vientos, I know Jesse Winker also talked about this in his introductory press conference and that he can play first base. Come on, let's not get too ahead of ourselves here. Jesse Winker is brought back to be a DH. He can be an emergency first baseman. He's played exactly 0 games in his career at first base. I don't doubt that he can do it. I think he can do it, right? Anybody can go ahead and play first base at a league average or maybe a little bit under subpar level. I don't doubt that. But that's not up David Stearns' alley. That's not what he's shown to build his teams around. Lackluster defense is not the name of the game with David Stearns. So I have a very hard time believing that. And if you move Vientos over to first base, you better have an option that's not internal at third base, at the very minimum.
It can only be Bregman, in my opinion. You don't move Vientos out of a position he developed himself into and become a not great, but solid, decent, I would say above average third baseman, and then move him to first base for anybody internally. And if it's not Bregman, don't give me Arenado. I'm telling you this right now. Don't give me Arenado if that's the case, because that makes absolutely no sense. You're moving a kid who proved to you that he can play third base to move to first base, which I know Vientos can play first base. For everybody who says he can't, look at the games, how many games he played first base in the minors. He played a ton because Brett Baty was playing a ton of minor league baseball at third base prior to him getting called up a couple of years ago when Vientos was the DH first baseman. He was playing first base a lot. So he can do it. I'm not saying he can't, but you can't. I mean, maybe I would be okay hesitantly for Arenado. Like, you could do a lot worse, but I don't think they would move Vientos for anybody, either Arenado or Bregman. I'd rather have Bregman at third base, because if you're going to, preach defense, Arenado and Bregman obviously are one of the 2 best third basemen in baseball still. But you can't give me the internal option. I don't care who it is. I don't care if fans love Acuna. He's really not a third baseman. You want to throw him over there? Maybe he can. Sure. Mauricio probably won't be ready to go to show enough to say that he can play opening day at third base. Who else is there? Jet Williams is technically not a third baseman. Like, he's not ready yet. So, like, it has to be Bregman or Arenado for even me thinking about moving Vientos to first base, in my opinion.
But even if it's, so even if it's not, right? Like, if you don't get either of those guys and you still want to move Vientos to first base, who's playing third base at that point? So it doesn't really make sense, right? I mean,
Exactly. It doesn't.
My worst fear is Brett Baty being the opening day third baseman. That's my worst fear.
If they do that, then all my arguments and all my stupid, annoying thoughts and opinions kind of came true with this team, that they weren't really going for it, and they were like, you're evaluating again. So you're telling fans, okay, buy season tickets, come to the amazing day on Saturday. And now Brett Baty, who's gotten multiple opportunities and lost his job yet again, who is a quadruple A player at this point, playing third base on opening day. And you're going to say, well, we have Juan Soto. Like, okay, maybe, just maybe Brett Baty finally figures it out and becomes half of the player we thought he could be. Is that enough? Maybe, possibly. I mean, he ain't hitting 30 home runs, I don't think. I mean, what he showed in the minors, you would think he could. But anything in the majors, he hasn't shown that. So, I don't know. You're pulling another evaluation year and pulling the hood over our eyes and basically lying to us. They're basically lying to you. That's the
the ground ball rate with Brett Baty is concerning. The Mets are kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place with Brett Baty because you're not going to get the value that you actually want for him in a trade. But I think that just freeing up, and I went over the outlook, the roster outlook, a little bit of a premature outlook on my video today that I posted earlier today. And I really do think that that kid needs a new change of scenery. And I don't think that what he's done with his swing is conducive to being an everyday major leaguer because, again, the ground ball rate is just too great and he doesn't really have much lift on the ball. Has to do something with his mechanics for sure because, again, he has no problem with gap-to-gap and home run power in AAA. And then you get to the major leagues and it's all of a sudden night and day different. So the pitching is probably just night and day different better in the major leagues. That's a given, right? And I don't think his swing can hold up. So I also don't think the Mets really developed him all that well when he got to the major leagues, right? I mean, you talk about, we've had a gripe with these hitting coaches, in particular Eric Chavez. I mean, everything that I hear Eric Chavez say, I'm not really a fan of. And again, he's the major league coach. I'm not. I'm just sitting here talking about this team. I understand that, but you would think that there would be some kind of tweak in his swing from 2023 to 2024, given what we've seen, and making him not be a 50% ground ball rate type of hitter, because that's what he is. In 2023, it was 50%, and in 2024, in the 50 games that he played, was about 54%. That's a problem. That's a problem.
You took the words out of my mouth. I was going to say, why haven't they tweaked his swing? Why haven't they talked to him or worked with him, shortening his swing a little bit? Maybe it just takes that. Maybe because his bat's too long, right? He's late on a lot of pitches, right? That's the reason why he has a lot of ground balls. He kind of has to jump at pitches quick, or, he has to react quicker than he probably wants to because of his long swing. Why wouldn't you try to work with shortening his swing? It seems like that would work a little bit better. Maybe try to hit the ball the other way a little bit more to compact your swing, right? I'm a left-handed batter, so I kind of understand the long swing. Like left-handed batters develop long swings just the way we swing. It's just natural.
Yep.
Right. But good players and natural hitters adjust and usually shorten up their swing. Right. Unless you're Ken Griffey Jr. and you have the eyes and the bat speed of anyone in baseball left-handed, you have to adjust your swing. And I think maybe Baty's just very, I don't know if he's, stingy, or he's just, the ego is there still and he doesn't want to change it, and the Mets are trying to. I think that's a bad job by Baty, but I'm not going to put it on Baty saying that he's not. You might be right. The Mets might have not developed him well when it comes to at-bats. You could say, oh, well, look at Drew Gilbert, look at Mauricio, look at Acuna, but they already have that natural ability that it seems like they have that, like the quick bat, and they can adjust to certain pitches. Brett Baty seemed like he doesn't, and that ground ball rate is scary. Yeah. And maybe they did find something in the swing, and maybe Baty's working on it right now, and maybe they're very excited about that, and we have no clue. But not one Met fan is going to be happy. I don't care. The biggest prospect hugger in Mets history right now that might be watching this show probably ain't going to be happy with Baty at third base and moving Vientos just to try out Brett Baty, because the Mets might be excited with his new improved swing.
I still think that, again, I think he'll succeed somewhere. I don't think it's going to be in the Mets uniform, given where this team's at right now and trying to compete. Maybe I'm wrong, but the Marlins have already showed interest in him. So we know that there's nobody really, now that Jesus Luzardo's on the Phillies, there's really nobody that I'm interested, with the Marlins, unless I'm just forgetting a name, minus Sandy Alcantara. And they already said that they're not dealing him in the offseason. They're going to wait mid-season, right? At the very earliest with him.
His value can be higher if he pitches the first
Right, time. Exactly. And they can get more for him. So I don't know. Maybe that's a thinking process. There's another, there are a handful of teams that I can see Brett Baty being successful on. If you're talking about Arenado, I mean, Baty, Arenado, package deal. I'm not saying 1-for-1, but that could be a thing too. I understand that a lot of people don't want Arenado, and we went over this on our last Mets Hot Stove that we did together. I would be fine if they are so adamant on Pete Alonso not coming back and they need an external third baseman, I'd be fine with Arenado, especially if the Cardinals take on a bunch of money, which would equate to, again, if they're willing to do the same thing that they were willing to do with Houston, that's about $15 million per for the next 3 seasons of Arenado. That's a steal, to be honest with you. And I think that his numbers will get back on par with what he produced in 2023. I do think that he's on a little bit of a decline with the power, but I don't think that's going to be as drastic as what he put up in 2024. But I think that, once more, I understand Pete Alonso has a lot of drawbacks. I can't see the Mets going 6 years for Bregman if he holds out for that 6-year deal. If Bregman was willing to lower his asking price to like 4 years, maybe 5, maybe 5. I don't even want to guarantee 5, but 4 years. Yeah, I'm doing that in a heartbeat. And I would hope David Stearns would do that too. But with what we've heard is that he wants to hold out for a 6-year deal. I don't see David Stearns doing that. So the most practical scenario that I see right now is a reunion with Pete Alonso. And even still, as we can tell, with him not being signed by anybody, let alone the New York Mets, there's still a lot of hurdles to get to. So let's talk bullpen.
Yeah. All right. So bullpen options, right? Whatever's happening with Kirby Yates and the Dodgers, right? Bob Nightingale came out with it, right? I actually checked Jeff Passan just to see if he brought up anything. He did. Right. He did say that they're in serious talks. Like nothing is official. Like he didn't. There wasn't a pending contract for pending physical. They're in serious discussion. So Yates is still out there. Maybe the Mets are still on him. Maybe they're not. I don't know. Right. I know that's wishful thinking at this point. Let's say he is going to be a Dodger. Right. Bullpen options. Look, I'm still not concerned about David Stearns with the bullpen options. I'm really not. There's enough out there that are good enough to throw in this rotation, along with the addition of AJ Minter, where I'll be perfectly fine. We can name about 5 guys where we could probably be perfectly fine with 1 or 2 of those arms, and we'll be okay. If I had to ask you right now, if there's one more bullpen arm to get, who is the guy you got if Yates is a Dodger?
That's a great question. There's different types of arms out there. I'd probably go Stanek. With a close second being David Robertson. But the only reason why I like Stanek is, again, I think that him in a full season in a Mets uniform could get back. He's not going to replicate what he did in Houston. I mean, those are career numbers. Those were just like astronomically great numbers for him. He went to the Mariners and struggled. But me knowing that he has 100+ miles per hour in his back pocket combined with a wicked splitter, I want that type of guy in a Mets uniform. I do. Especially when you have AJ Minter, Edwin Diaz, Reed Garrett, right? Daniel Nunez. That's a good bullpen core. Not be mad with David Robertson again. He doesn't throw as hard as Ryan Stanek. This is even going back into the regular season with all the content that we were doing, post games, etc. I want to stack electric arms in the bullpen. And at that point, they figure it out. I know that Stanek has a walks issue. I hear that loud and clear. But when you take a look at the way that he stepped up in the playoffs as well, I'm really inclined to believe that he can make a tremendous impact, and it would also be a 1-year deal for Stanek. It'd be a 1-year deal for Robertson. Tommy Canley is not a bad option as well, but again, he's kind of a soft tosser. He throws the changeup at like 70+% of a clip. So that's just a whole different type of pitcher regardless. Give me Ryan Stanek. 100-mile-per-hour fastball with the 4-seam and a splitter. I think that could pay dividends. And I think that, Stanek, Reed Garrett, then you get to Nunez, Minter, and Diaz to close it out. I think that's a pretty solid bullpen, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I like Stanek. Like I talked about this during the trade deadline. Like I want guys with playoff experience in the bullpen, right? Stanek was huge, right? I know everybody hates Phil Maton because he sucked in the playoffs, but he was one of our best bullpen arms down the stretch. Like he was a real reason why, like the Mets used him so much, and he was actually really good late in the season for us when Stanek was struggling with the walks and the bullpen was in shambles for the most part when Nunez went down and Buto was tiring. Maton was the guy at the end of the season. Look at his numbers late in the year, especially September. He was one of our best bullpen arms. He sucked in the playoffs, and I don't want Phil Maton back. But what I'm trying to get at is I like guys who've been there, done that in the playoffs, right? I think it's huge for the Mets to bring in AJ Minter because of that playoff experience with the Braves. I love that. Plus, he's already a good pitcher, but I like the look at his postseason numbers. Damn good, right, with the Braves. So the experience that Buto got. I wish Nunez would have got that experience, but I think Nunez is going to be a star in the bullpen for the New York Mets, right? Reed Garrett, that experience in the postseason. That's a big deal. And it means something to have guys that have been there and done that. I think having Diaz, close games in the playoffs, he's experienced that. Now, that's important because remember, go back to 2022. He pitched in blowouts that didn't matter, right? If I had to choose between Stanek or anybody else, I would go to Stanek. Even though I would be fine with D-Rob, I want Stanek. He has that fire. He's still a flamethrower. When he's on, he's hard to hit, especially with that slider. And I really like a guy like that is postseason experience. He got all the bumps and bruises of the postseason. I love that. You saw how he stepped up for the Mets in the postseason. If it wasn't for him, we might have not got past the Phillies. We might not got past the Brewers for that matter. It might not led up to the Pete Alonso home run in Milwaukee. Like, that's how good he was. So if I had to, I would take Stanek if it's one more arm. If it's two more arms, if it's an additional arm, let's say Stanek and somebody else, would you take another lefty like a Tim Hill, like somebody else, another lefty that can be like contradicting to a hard thrown Minter?
I don't think there's enough room for two. I don't think there's enough.
I was looking at that too. Yeah, I didn't think so. So all right, but if there is, let's say miraculously there is, who would you want other than Stanek?
Carlos Estevez. I like Carlos Estevez.
That's
Carlos Estevez would be a good get.
Yeah, and he don't have to worry about Lindor hitting the ball over the wall. So that helps.
Listen, I know that he struggled a little bit, especially against the Mets. And yeah, that was a meatball that he served up to Francisco Lindor in that NLDS series. And I'm just replaying that home run in my head right now. I like Carlos Estevez. I think it's going to come at a price. It depends on how far that they were willing to go for Tanner Scott, right? Before they pivoted to Minter. So if they were, by some miracle, willing to give Tanner Scott at least a 3-year deal or something like that before he walked, if they're in the same line of thinking here, what would you say?
I said I would love to know what they offered or offered.
Out on the table for Tanner Scott? I would too.
Just to have an idea, because if they were willing to go 3 years for Tanner Scott, they could get Carlos Estevez for 3 years, I think.
Yeah. I think, and I like Carlos Estevez a lot. I really do think that if you...
So let me ask you this to end that bullpen question. If it's either Stanek or Estevez, because if the Mets are willing to go 3 years on a bullpen arm, let's say they did go with Tanner Scott. Obviously, Tanner Scott is very much better than Estevez, but Estevez has a great arm. And he's not going to probably pitch in the 8th and 9th inning a lot of the times. He's going to be a 6-7 inning guy. What would you what would you do? Because Stanek, I think, can pitch more types of innings and be okay. I'm not sure about Estevez. He seems like a late inning guy to be successful. But what are your thoughts with that?
Hold on, I got to do a little cheat code here to see what Estevez's walk rate is. I don't really know about his control that much. Just see what his walk rate is. Oh my goodness. He was at 11% in 2023 and went down to 5.7% in 2024. So he significantly reduced that. He's also four-seam dominant, 97 miles per hour. So he's got that velocity. Slider. Do you know David Stearns loves the slider? Guys that possess the slider. I don't know, man. I was just hyping up Stanek's splitter and fastball combination. I might have to give the edge to Carlos Estevez. I mean, you take a look at the statistics over the past couple of seasons for Estevez, even going back into an Angels uniform, I like what I see. And yeah, he definitely is a late inning guy. You could even maybe move Minter down to the 7th inning and have Estevez set up Edwin Diaz, and I'd be okay with that. Although I'd be more inclined to think that righty, lefty, righty would make more sense 7 through 9, innings 7 through 9. I don't think you can go wrong either way. And I think that Estevez is going to be a hell of a lot more of an expensive option than Ryan Stanek. I think you're looking at a 3-year deal for Estevez versus a 1-year deal for Stanek. I don't know what the AAV would look like for Estevez, but I'm going to go Estevez and give him the slight edge over Ryan Stanek, I'll say.
Yeah, I would have
I
to
like
agree.
Estevez a lot, to be honest. And I think that he's a forgotten name on this market, Rob.
I agree 100%. See, that's why I was, might as well tell people like trying to get Will Simon on the show, because he can give a little bit more info on what the Mets kind of offer, or at least have an idea of what they might have offered Tanner Scott, so we have an idea of what they're willing to go for top line bullpen arms, right? Because Minter's, I would think you would consider him a tier B, compare a tier A, which probably Scott, and then everybody else is probably tier B, where it's in that 2 to 3 year. Because I don't think anybody else is getting a 4-year deal, in my opinion, from the bullpen.
No.
I think is 3 years max. So if the Mets are willing to go that extra year, and again, maybe Stearns is looking to really make this bullpen really damn good, and then it kind of combats the question marks or possibly the issues the rotation can have. So with the bullpen, we talked about that. Bench wise, I know that hasn't been a major topic. We already got Winker. That's part of the bench. We still assume that there's got to be one more bench guy here, and it can't be another outfielder, right? It doesn't make sense. Because
no more outfielders.
Right? And this is why we'd agreed with this, right? That if McNeil is going to be the second baseman because he's still on his team, I still don't believe that Acuna is going to play over McNeil, in my opinion. You can't put Acuna on the bench. The Mets don't want to sit Acuna. Remember, last year they didn't have a choice at late in the year because of Lindor's injury and McNeil's injury. So Acuna had to come up. I don't think they want to leave him on the bench and play him 2-3 days a week and split time with McNeil. You're not developing the player as much as you could. And they probably want him in the minors to get all the at-bats he could. There's only one position bench spot available if Acuna is not going to be on this opening day roster. You would have to get another infield, and that would probably be Jose Iglesias at this point, right?
I don't know. Let's do the math. You want to do the math real quick? 13 positional players. Let's go one by one. I mean, I did it in my video today. Let's do it one by one. So you've got 2 catchers that are locked for this team, right? That's Torrens and Alvarez. Infielders are going to be as such. You've got Vientos, Lindor, McNeil's a lock. That's 5 players, right? Let's go to the outfield. You've got Soto. You've got Nimmo, Tyrone Taylor, Jose Siri, Jesse Winker.
That's 10.
Starling Marte is 11.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have the combination of Baty, Acuna, Mauricio. That's 14 guys right there. That's already 14 guys.
Yeah.
So if you're not making room via trade or just sending these guys down, I think the most likely scenario is that Acuna and Mauricio start in AAA.
That's what I think.
I hope they find a trade partner for Baty. And then we can talk about Alonso coming into the fold. Maybe we can talk about Iglesias coming into the fold. But I think that's a little bit far-fetched at this point with what the Mets have shown us. Bottom line is that Starling Marte is taking up a roster spot. And I know that nobody wants to admit it because everybody's just stuck into this platoon DH situation. And it very well could be a thing between Winker and Marte. But if you want a Jurickson Profar on this team, you're going to have to get rid of and clear Starling Marte's roster spot unless you think Profar could play first base. That's it.
Let's say they do bring back Alonso, right? And that clearly leaves just one spot available on the roster, position player wise. That means you're signing Profar over Jose Iglesias because he can play as many positions, if not more, than Jose Iglesias. Like that means Jose Iglesias is not coming back.
Say one more time.
If you get Profar, that means there's no other roster spot for Jose Iglesias. So that's going to be your utility guy. If Marte doesn't get moved or McNeil doesn't get moved.
But right? How are you using Profar in the lineup is my question.
I would assume you're going to have to either DH him or you're going to have to DH Nimmo. That's the only.
So then what is Marte? So then what is Marte, sir? Like what is his purpose?
That's the problem. Like that's why Profar doesn't make sense. Because if you can't get rid of Marte, as we talked about many times, I think Profar and Marte something has to happen. Marte has to get moved before you can sign Profar, or you can sign Profar and find because remember there was a talk about Hunter Harvey from the Kansas City Royals for Marte, I think it was, and the Mets play a majority of that money. Maybe that's still out there. And Hunter Harvey, he's got good stuff, but he didn't have a good season once he got traded to the Royals last year. But
down year.
Yeah. So, I mean, he has a really live arm, and maybe the Mets can fix it. Again, the pitching lab once again. Maybe they can do that, but Profar doesn't make sense if you can't move Marte. That's why when I wanted to bring up the bench, because Profar is kind of that super utility guy, and he could probably play every day if you want to give guys days off. You can easily do that. Do they value Profar's outfield, infield experience over Jose Iglesias playing second, third, and short?
So I think that we have already established that Jeff McNeil is playing second base, right? I would love for Acuna to play second base. I would love to find a way to offload that Jeff McNeil contract. Nobody's going to go for it. I mean, there's multiple years left on that deal. It was a mistake that they gave it out to him. Maybe he turns it around in 2025. We're all hoping, but I don't think contractually you can state that the Mets are in any position to play Acuna over McNeil. I would love for it to happen. Again, I'm a very big fan of Luis Angel Acuna, but it's just not going to happen. So let's just talk about this bench real quick. I do think, whether you want to designate Winker or Marte as the bench guy doesn't really matter because, again, we're talking about a platoon. Yeah. Marte's splits against left-handers is awesome, by the way. I mean, he knows how to hit lefty pitching. That's about the only reason that you keep Marte and don't trade him is his ability to hit lefty. So let's just say this is your bench. Let's say Marte is on your bench. Perez is on your bench. Tyrone Taylor's on your bench. That's 3 bench guys, right? So 8 plus 3 is 11. Who are you rolling with the other 2 spots? Because you got 2 other spots to designate. Is Brett Baty going to start off on the major league team if you want another lefty bat? Is he going to be on the bench?
That means Alonso's not coming back then. Like, are you going to put Alonso on the team right now?
Because if you want to put it with Alonso, that's what I'm saying. So, even with Alonso, yes, correct.
Because that's the problem. Like, if Alonso's not back, then you can see Baty, Profar, Baty, Iglesias. Well, yeah, you could probably see it either way. So that's what I'm saying. Like, that's why the Alonso situation is such an issue for the New York Mets, because right now they can allocate 2 more roster spots for 2 more guys. That's why they're looking at Profar. And maybe if they did get Teoscar Hernandez or Jock Peterson, they might have just moved away from Pete Alonso because just based on the roster situation. Right now, there's 2 more spots officially that you can really talk about that is available. That's why they're talking internally. But again, if you get Pete Alonso, you got 4 guys, not including possible Iglesias, for 1 more spot on the roster. Like, that's the problem. So that means Baty, Acuna, and Mauricio are all going to start in the minor leagues. And we can all think that Baty and Mauricio are going to be in the minors because Mauricio is not going to be ready and Baty hasn't shown anything. And Acuna is kind of the anomaly at this point because he probably deserves to play second base, but the Mets aren't going to do that.
No, so again, I don't think so, yeah.
For all the prospect huggers, for all the people that talk about the future, the Mets clearly don't care enough about that to combat sitting McNeil or even trying to trade. Well, they might try to trade McNeil, but it seems like nobody wants him. You're not sitting $15, $60 million on the bench when it comes to, because McNeil is not good enough to be a DH. Marte is better than him in that aspect. And you already got Winker, so the left-handed DH, McNeil is not going to sit there. You're not going to sit him on the bench for Acuna. So they're not technically evaluating Acuna unless you throw him into your minor leagues. And you're not sitting him on the bench. So, again, what is it? That's the issue. Like, their plan had to revolve around getting Pete Alonso. And I truly believe that it was a Juan Soto, Pete Alonso offseason. But because of the Pete Alonso taking so much longer, which I think the Mets botched this, they probably thought Pete Alonso was signed already. So they could have officially figured out how to allocate the roster. They can't allocate the roster how they wanted to pivot or not pivot and get Pete Alonso. Their plan was clearly Juan Soto, Pete Alonso. That seemed like it was the trend. They probably thought Pete Alonso would have signed already with them or somewhere else, because this totally is hurting the way they're going about this roster, because they have no idea without Pete Alonso. with Pete Alonso, they need to know that, because we just talked about how many roster spots are available. It's either 2 or 1, and Pete Alonso's kind of holding that up.
No, I agree with you 100%. I also, going back to Baty, like, I don't think him being in AAA is going to do anything for his trade value. So again, when I talk about a rock and a hard place with this situation with Baty, is that, you either trade him for low value and not what you really want to give him away for, or you let him go to AAA, or at that point, you have to let him be on the major league roster to find some sort of regularity to try to build up his value at some point.
I don't think you can evaluate at the major league level right now. You can't say you can win games and then you have to.
I think it's difficult to do too.
Yeah, and that's the issue that I continue to talk about with a lot of people when it comes to either bring these kids up and play them, or use them as assets. Not just Brett Baty. I'm talking about other guys as well. Like, that's why it doesn't make sense. You're not spending the money to bring in better players above market value that they're clearly not trying to do. And you're going to send 3 of your guys possibly in the minor leagues, and Mauricio, Baty, and Acuna, all to the minor leagues, and then say, well, all right, we got to keep them in the minor leagues because we're trying to get them at bats and evaluate them, but we're also trying to win ball games. So we're not getting the top guys on the market, or at least the tier B guys on the market. We're going for the tier C guys and hoping for things to happen with them, and try to keep these guys in the minors to get them at bat. So they're doing exactly the opposite of what they're telling us they're trying to do. And again, this is the problem with the entire plan, that either they messed up on, or whoever they wanted didn't work out and they messed up their own plan, and they had to pivot to another plan, and that's not working clearly. They're not using assets or money to get better. So again, there's no reason why you're going to keep all those guys in the minors when at least 1 or 2 of them should be able to play in the majors. They seem like they're ready, at least somewhat. Like, if you're not doing that, then you got to spend money in better ways, and that's what I don't understand. Like, is there a big trade that we're not looking at here that might be on the table? Because Stearns did it last year. I don't know. I really don't know anymore.
There could be, but also let's not forget that these guys are being blocked by bad deals that David Stearns did not give out.
True.
He didn't give McNeil that extension, which was horrible. It's a horrible deal. He didn't give Marte a 4-year deal and now has to pay the price on this last year because nobody wants him around the league. I mean, you take a look at these roster spots that are being taken up by these veteran guys that David Stearns did not bring on. That's a previous regime. So at least let's just take a look at it from that lens too. I would just eat Marte's contract. I would buy that contract out, get him out of here.
It would help the situation so much better.
It would help the situation at this point.
You would have another roster spot for one of those young kids that you clearly want on this team, but you can't because of McNeil and Marte.
No, I agree with you 100%. I mean, McNeil's not really a candidate for you could if you really wanted to, but they're not going to do that. They're not going to do that. Maybe it gets to a point next year where they think about it if he has another down year, but it's not really attainable, I don't think, this offseason. So unfortunately, we're looking at a situation where Acuna is going to be delayed another year, right?
Or at least half a year.
And again, Baty at this point, a change of scenery would do him some good. And I don't think that he is going to, regardless of whatever the third base situation is for the Mets, whether it's Vientos or somebody else, I don't think that, if it's somebody else, it should be Brett Baty to begin with. I'd rather see Mauricio there when healthy. Hell, I'd even rather see Acuna there. I get the size is a problem at that position. I would take a chance on Acuna at third base over Brett Baty at this point. I'm sorry, I would. And I'm trying not to slight Brett Baty. Huh?
Even though Acuna hasn't really played third base?
100%. 100%. I don't think that transition would be hard for him at all.
Okay,
at all.
Well, see, I'm fine with that. Like that's the thing. Like, but again, I don't know why would you move Vientos to first base for Acuna that you have no idea that he can do it. Like, just sign Pete Alonso at that point. Like, I understand
That's
what
what
you're
I'm
trying
saying.
to say, like getting Acuna to, be on this roster, because I think it makes a lot of sense. But, who do the Mets value more, Marte or McNeil? Because they're
Who do
trying to
I
trade
value
Marte.
more?
Like, they clearly were trying to trade Marte, and
They
you haven't
value
really had
McNeil
much
more
on him.
because he's got more years left on his deal.
They value McNeil more because that's exactly. So they're trading Marte because he's a little bit more expendable because of the contract. That they
I don't
value
think anybody
McNeil
wants
more.
him.
And you're right. Like, Easy just said that you're bitching about the McNeil and a Marte contract. He wasn't, and I want to have you back here. You're not bitching at the contract. We all enjoyed that. Everybody wanted McNeil signed. Everybody liked the Marte signing at the time, right? But what it's doing now, it is blocking your younger guys for being on this roster, right? It's not Stearns' fault. You can blame Cohen a little bit, but again, we didn't have Acuna when we signed those guys. Mauricio was still very young, right? We didn't have Clifford. We didn't have Gilbert, right? We barely had a farm system. So making those signings made sense at the time because the farm system, wasn't what it was today as it was, wasn't what it was back then, a couple of years ago, than it is now. So, like, those signings probably would have never happened if these guys were a part of the farm system when they signed the deals for those players. So
listen, I'm just gonna say this: if there were veteran guys that were blocking these prospects or whatever, or like, if let me just put this clearly: McNeil and Marte are coming off of back-to-back down seasons apiece, right? That's a very large sample size that we have to work with now. So even forget about Acuna, forget about Baty, forget about Mauricio and blocking those guys. To have these veterans just block those positions in general and handcuff the Mets, finding external options even outside of those young guys is a shame. And I will say, I'm not really sure. I love the Starling Marte deal when it happened. He turned out a great 2022 season for the New York Mets, and then obviously did not work out for 2023 and 2024. But McNeil's extension, I think, was a little bit premature, to be honest with you. I think it was a little bit premature. And I don't think that they were thinking that far along, again, because they did that before even Acuna was in this organization. So that was kind of hard to foresee. But I don't know, man. I mean, we can go back and forth on this all day about what happened at the time of the contract. And the bottom line is that the Mets have a couple of guys blocking, any external moves happening. I think Pete Alonso is the easiest deal to still get done because you can just move Acuna to the minor leagues. You can do the same thing with Mauricio. I do think when Mauricio is healthy, he should be on this major league roster above a guy like Brett Baty. But how does this organization go about dealing with Brett Baty? Knowing the position that he's been in for the past 2 seasons, knowing that you either have to sell low on him or try to build his value back up, which is not happening in AAA. That's the biggest question mark that I have for David Stearns and this team moving forward. And that is where my fear comes in, is that they're going to try to build his value back up by trying to just stick him into, a bench spot and getting him some pinch hit at bats, or just making him a starter to begin with. That's the scenario that I do not want to have happen. And I know that you don't either, Rob.
Exactly. So like that's the issue, right? And again, starting the season, if Mauricio, in spring training, Mauricio was going to be the starting third baseman. So Stearns clearly likes him, right? He had him over Vientos. He had him over Baty. So that was obvious that Stearns likes Mauricio over those two guys. Nobody, I don't care what anybody says, nobody thought Vientos was going to do what he did last year. Specifically, they were more concerned about his glove than his bat. They were hoping he can hit as much, they hit more, so they can keep him in the lineup, because when you hit, they'll find a spot for you. Nobody thought Vientos would be an above-average third baseman, along with being the productive guy he was offensively. Like, both of those together were a shock to even the Mets, because even they valued Mauricio over Vientos and Baty. So which is great, right? Vientos, showed himself. He proved it. Great. He is a starter. He's going to play either first base, DH, or third base, right? We know that for a fact. He's going to be in the lineup. Mauricio is the X factor here. It would have been great if Mauricio was healthy and ready to go for spring training, because I would not be shocked if they would move Vientos to first base for Mauricio at third base and tell you they're okay with that. I wouldn't be, even though I would be excited, because I really like Mauricio, and Vientos can play first base for all the naysayers that say he can't. I would be excited, but deep down, I would know that if it doesn't work out, it would look really bad on the Mets, because you lose the value of Mauricio if he plays bad and not performs at third base and doesn't hit. Stearns looks bad because he let Pete Alonso go to make sure he can play Mauricio. And you leave yourself very much open for the Vladimir Guerrero situation. Maybe that comes up at the deadline, but if it doesn't, you lost a lot of production in 2025 that you could have had. And you can't be talking about 2026 when 2025 was supposed to be the year that you made another big step. So again, we'll see. But again, coming up on Profar right now, Chris, and the deep dive is kind of what we've kind of already went over that. But with Profar as a whole, do you think Alonso has something to do with the Profar situation, just based on the roster at this point and the lack of available roster spots?
At this point of the season, I know Profar's coming off of a 280 season in terms of the batting average category and 24 home runs with the Padres. He absolutely flopped in Colorado. For what reason, I don't know. But even back then, when he signed with Colorado, I thought he was going to get a multi-year deal, at least 2 years. And so the fact that he actually remains on the market right now is kind of signifying to me that he's probably in line for another short-term deal, 1 or 2 years. It has everything to do with Pete Alonso. Because again, if the Mets are not going to find something to do with Starling Marte, I just told you all, and we just told you all, that Profar is unlikely. And the only scenario that, and he's a super utility man, but he hasn't played third base in like 8 years or something like that. Ever since 2016 or something like that. I think in Texas is the last time he played third base. So is that really on the table for the Mets? I don't think so. He has played first base, in 72 career games. He's played it recently with the San Diego Padres. I think back in 2021, he had 20 games at first base for the Padres. I think it would be a little bit sad knowing that Pete Alonso is there for the taking at 3 years to shift to Profar. I think that'd be a little bit silly. I would love, and I would have loved, I think it's a little bit far-fetched to see a scenario where Pete Alonso's at first base and Profar could be your swingman outfielder or DH, kind of in the role of Starling Marte. But I also think the re-signing of Jesse Winker also blocks Profar a little bit, because Profar is a switch hitter. You know what I mean? He's a switch hitter. He can do it from both sides, but he's coming off of a great year, so he's going to at least command some money. I think that if they were really targeting Profar, they would have just not brought back Jesse Winker altogether, and they would have let Profar just handle the DH duties from both sides of the plate as it is.
Yeah, and I think because they can't move Marte, the reason why they signed Winker, because I really think they're going to make that a platoon DH, because
they know that they have to. Yeah, correct.
Right? Because like the Profar thing doesn't make sense at this point anymore. That's why I'm saying, that's why I brought up the Profar Iglesias thing, because Iglesias makes more sense for this team now. I don't care about the OMG. I really don't. It was fun. It was cool. Right. But I'm worried about what he can add to the team. And again, if the Profar, you would have to pick Profar over Iglesias if Marte wasn't here, because Profar can play basically every position on the field. Not very well, by the way, but he can play them. Right? Iglesias, on the other hand, can play second, short, and third, which is probably what the Mets need more than anything else. You don't need another utility outfielder. You have enough of those. Right? You got Winker, you got Tyrone Taylor, and you got Marte, you got Nimmo, you got Siri, you got Soto. It's too many. Right? You don't need more of those. That's why I think Jose Iglesias is the easier choice, because you need another infielder. At the very least, if you do bring back Pete Alonso, you want to give him some days off here and there. Vientos can go to first base. Right now, if you really can't do that if you don't have another utility infielder that can play multiple positions. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, you could use Acuna, but again, I don't see that as a fit. They're not going to sit him on the bench and play him sparingly 3 days a week. They're just not going to do that. Either they're going to play him every day or they're going to send him back to the minor leagues. That's why, the Winker sign him, and why the media is still going that the Mets are still interested in Profar makes no sense unless they have a deal with Marte once they sign Profar. That's the only thing I can think of.
Yeah, no, I agree with you 100%. It's just fascinating trying to get to the bottom of this actual roster merry-go-round here.
This is why the plan does not make any sense, because there's too many different scenarios that they block themselves with. Even with Stearns, what he's been doing with certain sign-ins and, not going another year for another guy, like his plan doesn't seem like it's a straight path. It clearly was deviated by something. Maybe it is the Pete Alonso not signing yet that kind of made him deviate well off his plan, but his plan actually makes no sense at this point. Like, no matter what he does at this point, the plan was clearly messed up somewhere along the line. Maybe we'll never know what it was, but it doesn't seem like it seems like it's off. Like there's something wrong.
I think if they get Alonso, I think the plan was very clear, to be honest with you.
Yeah, but didn't they lose out? I think they lost out on guys because of the Alonso situation hasn't been finalized yet, in my opinion.
Like who?
I think instead of Jesse Winker, they could have got it. They might have signed Teoscar Hernandez or Jock Peterson, because that filled that role. Winker, who could be a utility outfielder and DH.
But what if they really wanted Teoscar for that 3 years? Wouldn't they have just done that? Who cares what happens with Pete Alonso?
They were willing to go 3 years because I think they're concerned about the Pete Alonso situation. I think the Pete Alonso situation held them up on going maybe more money in another year for other players. Because if we're really talking about this luxury tax, and it might be an issue, we don't know.
I don't think.
Because remember, at the time, Minter wasn't signed yet. I don't even think Shomania was signed yet when that deal was going down, right? Because I think Shomania happened right after Teoscar Hernandez signed. I think it was like the next day or two. So, like, clearly they're trying to allocate money in certain areas, and they clearly weren't willing to do it because, again, Manaea wasn't signed yet. Pete Alonso wasn't signed yet. Minter wasn't signed yet. I clearly think they were going a different route other than Pete Alonso. I seriously believe that. I'm sorry, my fault. They were trying to get Pete Alonso along with trying to add a guy that could play multiple outfield positions and have that DH spot available as well. Included with a guy like Teoscar, because you don't go after Teoscar Hernandez and Jock Peterson. Like, that clearly is a Winker role, clearly. And they lost those guys, and now Winker was the obvious 1-year deal because it's the easier way to allocate less money to Winker because of the Pete Alonso. I truly believe if Pete Alonso was signed in late December or early January, I think they might have pivoted. I truly believe that they would have done something else this offseason that was on that plan, because their plan is clearly fucked up, in my opinion, because of Pete Alonso taking so long.
I don't know. I'm still trying to process in my head how Pete Alonso has anything to do with. I don't think that their plan has been to try to not go over $301 million. I think that.
Well, they still can if they want a roster. Like, that's the problem.
Well, that's what I'm saying. So Pete Alonso signing now versus back then wouldn't really have taken them out of the Teoscar Hernandez sweepstakes. I don't think that they have anything to do with each other, unless I'm just not seeing something that you're seeing.
Well, the only thing is, like just sign a couple of 1-year deal guys then. Like, if you're gonna go over the luxury tax, because even one more sign is gonna get them over that mark. So, like, what did Steve Coleman say before? If you're gonna go over it, you might as well go over it a lot because you're paying the same amount of tax on it and the percentage. Like, you're spending what you're spending. Like, you're not spending a ton more. Like, you're going to go over $1 million. You're still going to get hit with that big tax. So you might as well go over it. He said it himself a couple of years ago when he signed Scherzer and all those other guys. Like, he said that. So if he said that, then you might as well do it. Because if that's the case, get a couple of 1-year deal guys. Bring back Iglesias, bring back Stanek for a 1-year deal. Sign Pete Alonso, which will only be the multi-year deal. It's probably a 1-year deal because there's an opt-out after the first year. So, it's a bunch of 1-year deals. If you're going to do that, then just do it.
But they're already approaching that, even with no Alonso and Winker on a 1-year deal. That's what's not making sense to me.
But that's why it doesn't make sense what they're doing. They're still trying to, I'm not saying penny pinch, but they're still trying to, pay below or just at market value, even though they're going to go over regardless of what they're going to do. So the player you want, you're not going to go that extra year or extra money. The players that we clearly missed out on, you're not willing to do that. But you're replacing it with a Jesse Winker for 1-year deal when regardless if you sign Teoscar, Jock Peterson, or Jesse Winker, it's still going to lead you over that mark. So
I see what you're saying.
They're getting lesser players.
But I don't think it has anything to do with Pete Alonso, though.
No, not Pete Alonso. No. I'm talking about everybody else.
Okay, that's where I was getting
going over regardless.
Yeah.
So to not do it for a player that you clearly were after, and then you end up because nobody can tell me that Teoscar Hernandez is not better than Winker, right? You clearly were going hard after him. Even Jock Peterson, I think, provides a little bit more than Winker, in my opinion, offensively. Winker's not a very good defender, but he's better than Jock Peterson. But Peterson and Teoscar Hernandez bat is better than Jesse Winker. They hit a little bit more for average. They hit a little bit more power, and they bring more to the table. So you weren't willing to do an extra year or extra money for what? If you were trying to stay over the luxury of the 301, it makes sense, but they're clearly going to do it either with penny pinching, so to speak. So it just doesn't make sense. You can get 2 more 1-year deals. Let's say if they bring back Iglesias and a Stanek, that's clearly going to get them over 301, even if it's $8 million a piece.
I know that nobody wants to hear this, but if we just had the conversation about Starling Marte signing that 4-year deal, and now we're talking about him being a roadblock, you can make the argument that signing Teoscar for 3 years at age 33 already would do the same thing on the back end of that deal. You know what I mean? We weren't worried about the year 4 Starling Marte back in 2022. We were all like 101 wins, awesome. But now we're here at this point, and we're talking about him taking up a roster spot coming off of 2 horrible years. And I know that Teoscar Hernandez is probably going to give you better production than Starling Marte, but again, you'd be paying him in his age 36 season, just like the Mets are doing right now. Now, Jock Peterson, I would have definitely went 2 years for at his asking price 100%. I think his power capabilities, I think that would have been a perfect fit. But I'm just trying to give you a perspective and trying to relate that to Starling Marte and that contract of why they probably didn't want to go to that 3rd year. So.
Yeah, but if you're not going to do a deal because what Marte has done, that doesn't mean that Teoscar Hernandez is going to happen with Marte. Because Teoscar Hernandez and Marte are 2 totally different players.
No, I agree with you. I agree with you.
Hernandez is more of a power guy. He's not a speed guy, so he's not going to hurt himself, stealing bases like Marte could. And Marte, I think Teoscar Hernandez right now is probably a better fielder than Marte at this point with injuries and little less speed, reaction time. I think Hernandez could play a little bit better outfield. So, if you're gonna that's the issue again. If you're gonna concern yourself saying, "Oh my God, Marte," look at his deal in the 4th year or the 3rd or 4th year. That could be Teoscar Hernandez. True, but it also could be Marte for 2.5 years. Though that was really good. So I understand your logic. I just feel like you're going over that tax no matter what, regardless of what players you get. If you get the tier B, A, B, or C guys, you're going over. I don't know. So at least to Bregman. How about Bregman? I don't know what's going on with Bregman. If he's still holding on a 6-year deal, it's been the Tigers for so long. They clearly want him, but they're not willing to go 6 years. I don't know if Bregman's – see, this is the weird thing. Does Bregman want to go to the Tigers for 4 years and take less years? Who has a better chance of winning? You could say the American League is trash, so the Tigers, if they get Bregman, probably has a better chance. But if you're Bregman and you're going to take a 4-year deal Would you want to go to the Mets or the Tigers? Who has a better? Because Bregman don't care about 2029. I can tell you that right now. Maybe the Tigers and some fans are going to worry about that, but Bregman's worrying probably about the next 2 years per se. He wants to win over the next 2 to 3 years. You would think. Who has a better shot of winning, the Mets or the Tigers?
I think Bregman wants his money, man. I mean, I think I don't care where, I don't think he cares.
If the Tigers are not willing to give it to him, because clearly they're not. If there's not a market, similar to Bregman with Alonso, Bregman doesn't have a market.
I was going to say the same thing. They are in the same situation that nobody wants to go and meet their asking price.
At some point, Bregman's going to have to come down on his years, because if the Detroit Tigers, who need him, don't want to give him 6 years, if he probably has to go down to 4 years. I don't even think the Tigers want to go 5 years. Let's say if he goes to 4 years, and the Mets are like, I don't mind Bregman for 4 years. That's perfectly fine. That kind of lines up with everything you're trying to do here. If with the Lindor's age and Nimmo's age, and even if you bring back Pete Alonso age, that's a 3 or 4 year window you're trying to win with that core that fits right in your plan for the younger kids to take over with Juan Soto. So, this is Bregman. If Pete Alonso, if the Mets and Tigers both offer a 4-year deal, similar value, is he going to choose the Tigers over the Mets when he clearly is going to have the third base available if Vientos goes to first base, or even DH if you do sign Alonso? Bregman can fall into the lap just like Pete Alonso falling into the Mets lap, just based on pure numbers. If we're worried about the 6-year deal that Stearns clearly is worrying about.
I still think that there's an AAV issue with him too, because I still think that he's holding out this false hope of getting $30 million per year, which is probably not going to happen at this point. You take a look at where negotiations went south between the Astros and Bregman. All the reports were saying that the Astros were at $150 million. And he was holding out hope for more, maybe more so towards 170, 175, somewhere in that range. And so
that's Boras again screwing up the market on him again. That I think that Boras probably spilled him a bill of goods saying, "Don't take that deal. We can get you more." And then look at the market.
No, I agree with you. So again, he's going to have to come down in his years, and he's probably going to have to come down on the AAV, because again, if it's between the Tigers, I don't even know if the Mets are in at this point, because we've heard absolutely nothing on the Bregman sweepstakes. I don't think
when the Mets pulled the trigger.
Well, right. And that's when the Mets could just come out of, just nowhere and do that. But I think the Tigers definitely have, just like the Mets do with Pete Alonso, I think the Tigers definitely have their actual stopping point with Bregman, because they are a team that is disadvantaged in the payroll aspect, which is kind of a bad look on the Mets if they're doing that with Pete Alonso, because they're not disadvantaged in that. But just to stick on the Tigers here, is that they're approaching, right? Another $25 to $30 million is they're already approaching their top payroll allocations that they've posted in this decade so far. So yeah, I do think the holdup with that is the years and the money with Bregman. I think that he's going to have to come down on years for sure, but I wouldn't put it past Bregman and Boras that there's an AAV issue there too, because I'm not sure if the Tigers are going to go $30 million there. I don't think the Mets would even go $30 million.
Well, the Mets need to do what the Dodgers did with Tanner Scott, with the Cubs. They need to jump in, because clearly the Dodgers weren't probably very much interested in Tanner Scott enough, but they probably, through the grapevine and hearing a little whispers here and there, they're probably like, well, this is the number. Tanner Scott's not getting it from the Cubs. We can offer him this, no problem, and still fit within our whatever range they were looking at. I think the Mets can do that. I don't think the Mets are quote unquote in on Bregman, but there's no reason why they can't pivot, especially if this Pete Alonso situation drags out. The Mets have to go. You want to move Vientos to first base, you get Alex Bregman, you solve your issue. You clearly do. Your lineup will be perfectly fine without Alonso and in Bregman, with Juan Soto, with Vientos, with Lindor, with Nimmo. You'll be fine. But I think the Mets should have just signed Bregman, and if you found a way to get Pete Alonso still with the deal you wanted with Alex Bregman, you just DH Vientos, and you have one of the best lineups in baseball.
That's not happening, unfortunately.
Probably not. But again, like, if the Mets are so concerned about market value, you're clearly getting Bregman for under market value. If it's a 4-year deal, and maybe you throw an opt out in there, maybe you give him, incentives, bonuses, whatever the hell you got to give. But I don't know. It's just
is that true though? Is that true? Because 4 years might be the market for Bregman at this point if nobody's giving him a 6-year deal.
Well, then again, the Mets should be well in on him if it's the market. Like, that's the thing. Like, they're not going to give Pete Alonso a 5-year deal unless the market tells them to. But the same thing with Bregman. Like, if Bregman's market is 4 years, no team should not be in on Bregman. If you need a bat in a lineup, you should be in on Bregman. I'm sorry, that's including the Mets. That's including any other team that needs a bat in their lineup. The Cubs, the Mariners. You need a bat in your lineup. 4 years is gonna throw you away. I don't care. Look, AAV might be an issue for some teams. It shouldn't be an issue for the Mets if you're gonna go over to 301. It shouldn't be an issue. 4 years is not gonna hurt your future. It's really not. It isn't. Like, I don't believe it is at all. So, like, it's just, what is the plan? The plan does not make sense for the Mets and for many other teams for that matter. Like, there's crucial bats out there. Like Toronto, they should just get Bregman and it solves your issue. Like, it really does. Like, Toronto doesn't even make sense. You're getting Pete Alonso to piss off your face of your franchise. Makes no sense to me. Like, some of these teams, their plan is so stupid, and including the Mets in this, that it's mind-boggling to me.
But if that was clear cut, if it was so clear cut, somebody would have already signed these guys already. So the fact that the Mets aren't doing it,
you don't want to spend the money in the years, and they clearly have it. Like, I'm sick and tired of these owners saying they don't have it. The Cubs owner came out and saying, well, we got to give money to this person and that person. We got to pay our shareholders and this. And, like, shut up. You have the money. The Mets clearly have the money. The Mariners clearly have the money. The Cubs have the money. Like, the Tigers have the money. Like, all those young players, your payroll is basically nothing. And you don't want to give even Bregman $30 million is a lot, yes, but you need him. Like, you might lose out on a guy to make your team better for extra year and $20 million more, and then you're gonna complain at the end of the season that, oh, we can't win because look at all the other teams doing stuff. Like, it's just, I don't get it, man. I really don't. I think the Mets screwed this up. I think a lot of teams screwed it up. Like, all around baseball, like, other than the Dodgers, half of these teams are not making no sense. Like, even the Yankees, and I can't stand the Yankees, even the Yankees plan after Juan Soto made sense. They clearly got their needs. Like, I can't stand them. I hope they fall on their face. But once Juan Soto wasn't going to them, they pivoted and got stronger in other areas when they probably didn't have to do it, but they got stronger in other areas. That's what I want the Mets to do. Right? There's no reason why Bregman and Alonso can't be on this team together. How about building on that strength where your rotation is questionable? You want to build on the bullpen? Great. Build on the lineup in the bullpen, and we can have a conversation about less question marks going into the season. It's just silly to me.
I don't know, man. The Yankees would have been nothing if they didn't pivot. So they had to. They were forced to. I mean,
but they did. Like, they could have easily went the route the Mets were going. Like, if they didn't get Juan Soto and the Mets would have signed 1-year deals because, oh, we missed out on our guy. They did it last year with Yoshinobu Yamamoto. Once they lost out on him, they went the cheaper route with every other pitcher. Like, they clearly did that. Like, and I don't know. It's very odd. Very odd to me. Like, the Mets had to pivot, and they're still pivoting in a way that doesn't make sense because they're still not doing anything else. Like,
that you know of, though. I mean, if Pete Alonso signs tomorrow, we're talking about it. We're talking about a different situation here.
Agreed.
You know what I mean?
But again, they're waiting for that to happen. Like, they're not doing other things that could look. If you're waiting for Pete Alonso for whatever reason, just go get Bregman. And you know what? You fuck Pete Alonso in the process for not taking 3 deals that you offered. And you're not wasting time. You're supposed to better your team. Stop playing this game with Pete Alonso. This is both the Mets' fault and Pete Alonso's fault. At some point, either Pete, take another deal or sign with the Mets because you don't have another deal, or the Mets say, you know what, Pete, we can't wait any longer. We need another bat. Don't tell me Jurickson Profar is that other bat because you're lying to us. All right, go get Bregman if it's not Pete Alonso. It's either one or the other, because if it's none, I mean, you screwed the entire offseason when it started so great with signing Pete Alonso. I mean, Juan Soto, excuse me. Like, it's either or at this point. You either get Pete Alonso or you get Bregman. You can't wait until February 15th to sign Pete Alonso. Like, who does that benefit? It doesn't benefit anybody. Pete Alonso's behind the 8 ball because he's coming in to a squad. All right, he already knows the Mets and everything like that. But spring training already started. Pitches and catches there. First full workout is already starting. Like, I just don't get it. Like, sign Pete Alonso, give him a few extra $1 million, give him the extra year. Come on already. Like, you're playing stupid games when you don't have to penny pinch Pete Alonso. I don't like Pete Alonso. I think he has too many flaws, but give him the extra year and a few extra dollars. It's not the end of the world. Because at the end of the day, if you do get Profar and Bregman and Alonso are not here, you clearly were trying to save money. On what? Nothing.
I don't think that. I don't know. I'm going to stand firm in the fact that the Mets gave an opportunity to Pete Alonso to sign for 3 years with an opt-out of $23.5 million. He clearly did not like it. He's going to look elsewhere. He's not getting what he wants. The Mets offer is still probably on the table. I mean, what are we doing here? Like, why would the Mets up their offer for the sake of Pete Alonso just saying yes at that point? Just say yes to $23.5 million and let's get it over with.
That's because they need to pivot. Like, they can't just wait. Because if Bregman comes, you said that Toronto's desperate, right? We talked about them being desperate. If they're desperate, right, they can play this waiting game as well. But let's say it gets to February, it's the end of January, and the Blue Jays are like, damn, we're not getting anything done here with Vladimir Guerrero Jr. All right, Pete, we're going to give you 4 years, 5 years, and now you're a Toronto Blue Jay. And what are the Mets going to do? If Bregman's still on the board, are you going to not get him because you're afraid of the 5-year deal? And now you're going to tell me Profar and Mauricio?
I think their desperation move was giving Santander that 5th year. I don't think that they're.
Better hope they're right, because if they're not, they better sign Bregman. I'm telling you that right now, because anything else is not worth the time. Profar is not going to make me excited. I like him if you get Alonso, sure. But if you tell me Profar and Bregman and Alonso was out there and you lose out on both of them, or you don't want to give Bregman the money and the years, and you lose out on Pete Alonso because you were being stubborn at that point. Now, again, the Mets are going to have a final counteroffer with Pete Alonso. We all know that. But if they're not willing to do that, like I at this point, I'm like, oh, no. But again, these two guys are still out there. Until they actually do it or sign, I mean, I'm not killing Stearns yet. I don't want to, but it seems like he can really set himself up for a bad offseason. Because I don't think they're going to lose Pete Alonso on another year and a few extra dollars. But I do worry about a team, like you said, Chris, that are desperate, that, you clearly saw the desperate move in Anthony Santander. They lost out on every free agent. They needed Anthony Santander to sign, right? What if, the Vladimir Guerrero situation is going to be telling. If they don't think they're going to be able to extend him, they might be desperate enough to give stupid money in years to Pete Alonso, similar to what they did with Santander. They might go 4 or 5 years with a lot of extra bonus incentives and money and opt-outs and all that stuff. And if the Mets are willing to do it and they lose out on Pete Alonso for a few extra years and money, don't give me Jurickson Profar and tell me that you're excited about being a playoff team. Like, I just don't see it. Like, then you have to get Bregman, because then you just completely messed up your offseason, in my opinion.
I think eventually Pete Alonso is going to find his way back to the Mets. I think that's how it plays out. I think that we could probably see it go until February something at that point. To me, it doesn't matter. They need Alonso. Alonso needs the Mets. It's mutually beneficial for both of them. I think they'll figure it out. I don't think that there's another team that's serious enough, or that Pete Alonso is taking seriously enough to even entertain that. Because again, let's just get this out the way with Pete Alonso. He is not concerned about this deal. He's not. He is very adamant about getting that opt-out now that he's already down to 3 years. Year 2 and year 3 is insurance in case he stinks it up again like he did in 2024 and for the most part in 2023. He wants to go back out on the market next offseason with Vlad Jr. if he doesn't re-sign an extension or sign an extension with Toronto, and he wants to get another long-term deal. That's the end game for Pete Alonso. And the best scenario for him to do that is by putting up great numbers and being in a pretty decent top 5 of a lineup in a Mets uniform. So, and that's also mutually beneficial for the Mets because if Pete Alonso has a great year, fantastic, you'll take that production, he opts out, and now you can go re-sign or you can go out and sign Vlad Jr. if that's what you really want. So, I don't know. I think that we're, I'm not losing patience. I haven't lost patience. I think that this waiting game is what it is. And he'll eventually find his way back. I think that's probably what the Mets were still envisioning. I mean, I made a video months ago talking about the Mets going quote unquote full bore with Soto before Soto even signed and Alonso. Like that was the plan all along. Now, I wasn't quite sure what the actual contract valuation in terms of the years was going to be for Pete Alonso. And now we know that it's 3 years with opt-outs. So at the end of the day, I will say I agree with you. Listen, if Pete Alonso isn't a Met, Bregman, I'm not going to say no to at all. I've already been very adamant that left side of the infield with Lindor and Bregman would be awesome. The Mets aren't giving him 6 years, though. So unless his asking price comes down to 4 years, then maybe the Mets are going to be a realistic option for him. Because you're right, it doesn't handcuff the Mets because Jesse Winker's on a 1-year deal. Vientos will play first base for 2025. Then you can move him over to DH and pursue your actual full-time first baseman, and you'll have Jesse Winker off the books. And at that point, you can go pursue somebody else too, because Brandon Nimmo at that point, I don't know, man. He's probably his trajectory is probably going down toward the path of being a DH. So
we have enough of those.
I still think, Rob, I will say this objectively. I'm going to disagree with you and say that I still think that this plan that the Mets have had all along is intact. And I don't think that this holdout with Pete Alonso is necessarily them deviating away from any sort of plan. I do think that if they got the sense that Pete Alonso wasn't going to be here, they would have went out and tried to get Santander. Maybe Santander was holding out in hopes of still joining the Mets to see how the Pete Alonso situation was going to play out. If it was an or situation, not an and, but an or situation. And maybe Toronto got that sense as well, and they were desperate, and they're like, just take the 5th year. Don't go to the Mets. Come to Toronto. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, do you agree if Pete Alonso does go elsewhere, let's say even if it's Toronto or wherever, do you think Bregman needs to be signed? Like they need that bad.
Yeah, if it's 4 years, I think Bregman definitely needs to be signed.
I don't think it matters. I think you have to get him. I'm sorry. I think you have to be that desperate team all of a sudden.
If we're talking about competing and putting the best foot forward out in, on the field in 2025 and talking about winning now, because again, I mean, I'd love to sit here and talk about 2025. I don't want to talk about 2026. I mean, I know that we're forced to, right? With the prospects and the young guys and all that, but I'd rather talk about 2025. And I think that Bregman on a 4-year deal, regardless of however, year 4 plays out, I think the years up front from Bregman that you get would be advantageous. I mean, the bat and also the glove. I mean, a Gold Glove caliber third baseman alongside a guy that should be a Gold Glover in Francisco Lindor. I'm going to be sold on that all day long. But if you're asking me Pete Alonso or Bregman at this point, I'm still going to tell you Pete Alonso. I'm still going to do it because again, you're not handcuffed to the rest of the years there, and it's better of a situation for the Mets, even if Pete Alonso opts out after 2025. I will say that. So yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
2 hours because there was so much to talk about. Rapid fire time. Again, we're gonna ask each other questions, and the super chats are gonna be answered right now. All right, Chris, I got one for you. I'm not gonna say it's easy, but it's a simple question. Who do the Mets sign next?
Who do the Mets sign next?
Yeah, just the next sign in. Who is it?
I want to see like a passing bomb coming from, coming on Twitter talking about Pete Alonso. I inevitably think they're going to sign a bullpen guy, and I'll say it's going to be just going out on the limb. There's no basis to this, but I'll say they re-sign Ryan Stanek to a 1-year deal as their next move. And I think inevitably they round out the offseason by signing Pete Alonso. I think that's the most likeliest of scenarios at this point. Again, I wouldn't count out Robertson, wouldn't count out Canley. But yeah, I think Stanek is a good bet.
Okay. Cool.
My rapid fire question to you is, man, I've been trying to ask about the young guys for the past couple of Mets hot stoves. Final AAV on Pete Alonso, knowing that the Mets have $23.5 million on the table, knowing that he doesn't want to take that, he's being stubborn. What's your final assessment on what deal he signs per year?
I think the Mets are gonna have to go a little bit higher because I think the Blue Jays are gonna offer Peter Alonso a contract. I think it's gonna be they're gonna add a few more $1 million a year, around $25 million. I think they're gonna stick to their 3-year deal, but I think they're gonna be forced to give him a 4th year.
Okay.
That's what I think. I think it's gonna be 4 for 100.
4 for 100. Okay, I can see that. Does he get an opt out after each year?
Sure, why not? Whatever he wants at this point, because the Mets kind of put themselves behind the 8 ball with that.
I have a follow-up question because again, we're in this time period where we need to transition. There's still so much of the offseason left, it feels like, with the names that are on the table. But also we need to transition into like some outlooks of the roster and outlooks of projections, etc. Who do you think hits the most home runs for the Mets in 2025?
Is this including Alonso?
No Alonso. Let's say no Alonso. Who hits the most home runs?
I'm going to go out on a limb and say Vientos.
Okay.
Yeah.
30 plus, I'm assuming.
I was going to say Soto just to piss some people off, but I'm going to say Vientos.
Over under 35.
Ooh. God, I hope it's over because then the Mets are in trouble. Without Pete Alonso, they need to hit a couple of guys to hit over 30. Lindor, Soto. They may even need Nimmo to hit 25 and Alvarez to hit 20. I'm gonna say just over.
That's my key too. Also, and we can talk about this on a future stream, is the resurgence of Nimmo and Alvarez, given what they gave the Mets in 2024, hoping that they get back to resurgence is going to be such a breath of fresh air, and it's going to make things easier for this lineup. But let's get into the super chats here. It's been quite some time on this stream.
All right. Jonathan says, Rob, like your chat on Japanese players to LA. Okay. I think that was one of the live streams I did. Jonathan, again, how do we compete with LA if we have an owner who all of a sudden lost his wallet? I'm not going to say lost his wallet. I don't know, Chris, if you agree or not, but what are your thoughts on that comment?
I don't think he lost his wallet again. I think that if you're comparing, who runs the Dodgers versus, who's running the Mets right now, Steve Cohen is the single richest single owner, right? I mean, he's not a corporation. It's his pockets, his money, and you've got a whole entire group over there in LA. So that's what I'm saying. Going dollar for dollar with the Dodgers is just not achievable. And the Dodgers got to this point because this ownership has been in place for quite some time now. They could have came in and started spending recklessly from the start, right? That ownership group in LA, but they didn't. They had a very methodical plan, and that was to build up their homegrown talent. And then once that stepping stone was complete, then they could have the opportunity to spend whatever at their leisure with the ferment or whatever.
Well, they also built up their farm system and basically traded all of them to get better. They traded a lot of Betts and all those other guys, like all the guys, like they're a bought team now. Like there's not a lot of homegrown guys on that team anymore because they traded a lot of the farm system.
Agreed, but I don't think the farm system with the Mets right now is up to that level.
Oh no, I don't think so.
Yeah, I think it's still far off.
Yeah.
But yeah, I hear you, Jonathan, and I understand people, side-eyeing Stearns and Cohen. I'm not going to be naive to the fact that it takes a lot of patience to even just have the patience to know that this is a win now team. So I hear the concerns, Jonathan. I don't think that he all of a sudden lost his wallet. I think the Mets have a couple more moves up their sleeve. I think we're talking about the Mets come opening day in a different light than we are right now. I'll say that. Maybe that's just false optimism, but I believe that.
All right. So Duran says, do you think Baty, Mauricio, Acuna can surprise us like Vientos, Nunez, Manaea, Severino, and Garrett did last year?
Baty, no. Mauricio, I've always believed in his offensive capabilities. I struggle to see how he's going to fare in the field. Acuna, I like. I'll say Mauricio, Acuna, yes, but I still think they'll start off in AAA, unfortunately, with what we talked about in this stream.
The difference with these names is that the names that he mentioned that were on the team last year, they all had spots available. The Baty, Mauricio, Acuna don't.
Yeah.
If they had a starting role, maybe you could see surprises. But Vientos, got that spot because Baty sucked. Nunez, because all the bullpen guys got hurt. Manaea, he was in the rotation. Severino was in the rotation. Garrett was a surprise, but he was needed because the bullpen was basically hurt. So, they had opportunities to do it. There's no guarantee that Baty, Mauricio, Acuna are going to be have that availability or that open availability to provide that surprise if there isn't any injuries or anything like that. And Duran again says Dodgers staff, Tyler Glasnow, Ohtani coming off surgery, Snell only 2 years, 180 innings, Yamamoto injured last year, and even Roki had injury concerns in Japan. There's no guarantees in baseball. I agree with that.
Yeah, agreed. 100%. I mean, you still got to play the games. It's undeniable that rotation with the injury concerns is the best. It's the best rotation in baseball, obviously, if they stay healthy. But yeah, I agree with you, Darren. I mean, but even still, going back to last year, you take a look at their injury concerns and the injuries that they dealt with, and they still found a way to put it together and win a World Series and get past the Mets and the Yankees. So on the flip side of that is that, once you stockpile depth, right, and build also an elite bullpen, even if those injury concerns happen and they come to fruition, nobody wants to wish badly, even though we don't like the Dodgers. We're not actively rooting for injuries, but let's just say there's a scenario where they get hampered by injuries again. I mean, they've got what it takes to, weather the storm. And that's just the nature of what they're doing out there. I mean, we have not seen a team of this magnitude ever before. I mean, no, never before. I mean, not even the Yankees teams back then. Nobody's seen this.
Their depth is better than some starting teams.
Agreed.
It's
100%. Crazy. I mean, that's what comes with an active $370 million payroll. I mean, the deferments that they're giving out, it's undeniable what they're doing. They're a juggernaut, and they're going to be a juggernaut for a lot of years to come. And that's the unfortunate scenario that the rest of the league has to offer. What I will say, and shout out to Jonathan and Darren, by the way, with the super chats. Hopefully we did a good job answering your questions. What I will say is that Ken Rosenthal, to round this stream out, is that he said that it's impossible to ever implement a salary cap in baseball, and that it would be useless because the baseball, Players Association, the MLBPA, would never stand for it, even though the owners probably want that to happen, which could create another lockout after the 2026 season. Unfortunately, with the new CBA coming in, I believe it's after 2026, if I'm not mistaken, right, Rob?
Yeah, 2026.
2020. Yeah. So it'd be beginning of 2027. It's going to create an unfortunate circumstance, and the Dodgers are going to have a very big role in those talks in that meeting room. What I will say is that I agree salary caps probably won't get passed. The deferments, the allowance on deferments, that probably needs to be looked at, right? Yes, the Dodgers, you've never seen this magnitude of deferments from any team, and any player like Ohtani. $68 million deferred. They're still paying $46 million in terms of a luxury tax cap hit on Ohtani, but that's still 20 $24, $25 million off of the $70 million AAV that they would be paying on him. So that's still a huge differential. And they've got deferments on other players as well. So I think that if the MLB does anything and the players look at anything, screw an actual salary cap, that's fine. Teams are going to have to spend, right? And they're also trying to penalize probably these lower paying teams like the White Sox, et cetera. And I'm all for that. But I really do think that they should take a look at deferments and the allotment of that. I'll just say that.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you. I think the deferments have to be looked at. Like you can't have $1 billion over a year and a half, 2 years of offseason and have over $1 billion in deferments. And then people didn't realize, like, I know I had an argument the other day with somebody in the comments saying that, oh, the luxury tax, that number is a part of the luxury tax. Yeah, but not all of it. Like the $70 million for Ohtani isn't $70 million. It's 46, like you said. And other deferments, like the Tanner Scott, it looks like 18 million, but it's probably only 12 million on the books. Like that, these deferments, they probably saved about, I would say, what do you think, Chris? Like around $50 to $60 million on their luxury tax based on deferments. Overall, probably it's probably more, but that's just a quick round number. Like that would have been added to their payroll. They would have been above $400 million.
Yeah,
like maybe they were willing to do that, but they're clearly trying to save a little bit on the year luxury tax. But they're getting all these players because of that. That's what people don't seem to realize. The deferments matter in the luxury tax, even if it's a few $1 million. It adds to them getting other players. That's why people are getting upset about it.
But it also sets up an opportunity. Sorry to cut you off. It also sets up an opportunity for them to reinvest that money as well in another situation where they would otherwise. And I'm not talking about reinvesting in other players. I'm just talking about reinvesting to, like, however they decide to use that break and reinvest it where otherwise they would have been forced to allocate that for that year. I don't know. And I see a comment here from Nostalgic saying that, let's see here. What does it say? The players were willing to defer. How are you going to penalize players who want to win over their money? I don't think it's penalizing them, to be honest with you.
Penalizing the players, because another team can do the same thing and defer the money as well. But here's the other issue that I brought up on the Mets Talk Live the other day, that when you defer money, you have to have that money available, which they do. You have to have that money available in a separate account. So you show the government, the SEC, all the important people or the union that you have that money available down the road. So what they're doing is saying they have a $1.5 billion deferred. They got to have that in a separate account. And guess what that also does? That involves that adds interest to so they're not only deferring that money for years down the road, they're gaining interest on that money in that account along that process. So they're making money on that money that they deferred. So 15 years from now, when they pay all that deferment money, they're probably going to make millions upon millions of dollars just on that interest on deferment. So it's not just benefiting the players, it's benefiting the organization and the ownership by getting that interest from that money.
That's what I was trying to say too. Like they're good. They're reinvesting. They're not even reinvesting. They're just collecting on that. Then that's what my point was.
And that's why I'm not mad about the deferment. Like, I love what the Dodgers are doing as a fan, because I love my owner to do that. Owners got to realize that if you want to defer money, you're gonna have to put that money in the account and not touch it, because there's violations and laws that you can't touch it based on union and CBA and just government rules and regulations. Other owners can do that, and maybe some more owners will like this and realize, wow, the Dodgers can do that. They're going to make a ton of money on interest. Maybe other owners are saying, hey, if I have $50 million in deferred money on all these players on my team, I can make $50 million in interest over that time period, and that's money in my pocket, even if you don't want to reinvest it, because that's all a lot of owners that don't never spend money care about. I'm not saying the team like the Marlins are going to defer tons of money, but like teams like the Pirates that might be running on a small budget, maybe they can sign a 4-year, $80 million deal and defer $50 million of it for a player, and they'll make money off of it. Like that's something that can actually be possible. Maybe.
Unfortunately, what the difference is here is that the Dodgers are a destination where players,
Correct.
specifically the Japanese players, want to go, right? As we've seen with Sasaki, Yamamoto, and Otani. But even even other players as well, like they are a destination that players want to go to, and so they're willing to take that deferment. But other teams, if they were wanting to go elsewhere, if they were willing to go elsewhere, maybe they would want their money up front instead. Maybe
Correct.
it's a situational difference, which I don't know how you even the playing field there at that point.
Let me ask you something. Where would you rather play? Would you rather play in New York where it's cold most of the time? You're playing in cold, or you want to play in Southern California, make your money anyway, and know you're getting money down the road. Like, I'm sorry, you have a chance to win, and you're going to Southern California. Whatever you want to think of politics or tax, whatever. A lot of these players, they might care about that, but again, when you get deferred money like that, you're not worried about getting taxed. With that money, most of your money, so you're good. So you have a chance to win, and you're in Southern California where the weather is mostly perfect, besides fires and nonsense like that. But unfortunately, but like it's better weather. It's a better living environment when you got millions and millions of dollars, when you're away from all the crap in certain cities. But like you're not worrying about that stuff. So I'd rather play in the warm weather than freeze my ass off in April and May in New York. Like people, unless you got to overpay me to do so. Like that's the issue. One last thing, last super chat. Do you trade Baty? If so, what value does he have? Part of a package. He clearly is the lowest of Mauricio and Acuna. Your thoughts? Yeah, Chris.
It's not great. It's not great. You'd probably have to package Baty along with maybe some other, players to get something that you would actually want. I mean, whereas Baty, I don't know, last year before that you could probably still get some decent value for him. So this is what we were talking about too, Jonathan, earlier in the chat, is like and this is what I was talking about with the Mets being stuck between a rock and a hard place of deciding whether to trade him for low value or whether to trade him, later on down the line, but be forced to play him up front. So I don't know, man. At this point, Baty definitely has the lowest value. You're right, of Mauricio and Acuna. At this point, if you're talking about a 1-for-1 deal for Brett Baty, you're talking about a back end of the rotation type of arm, or you're talking about a reliever at this point. I mean, that's really what it is. I'd have no doubt in my mind that other teams still see value in Brett Baty, but they're not going to let that be known, right? They're not going to be foaming at the mouth of trying to trade for this guy because they know the Mets don't really have many other options in terms of what to trade for him. So I can see the Mets waiting it out, unfortunately, just because they don't want to let him go for the low.
Here's the thing. I think the Mets still value Brett Baty.
They what?
I think they value Brett Baty.
It could be true.
I think teams that like Hunter Harvey, for example, you don't think if you offer Kansas City Brett Baty for Hunter Harvey, they would do it. You know why? Because it's cheap value. He could probably play on their team. I don't know their third base situation, but they could probably find a spot for him somewhere, and he's cheap. And again, the reason why the Mets probably won't do that is because they value Brett Baty, and there's no benefit in trading Brett Baty for the New York Mets unless you're getting something in return. Like, you're not trading Brett Baty for a bunch of balls. I know people are talking about that, but that's not an incentive for the Mets. Why are the Mets trading Brett Baty to get back, a 70 ERA bullpen arm that might not even be in the majors? They're not going to do that. It's more beneficial to keep Brett Baty to maybe somebody either during the season or during the trade deadline might see some value in him then when you try to put a package together where it might incentivize the Mets putting Baty in a package, or Brett Baty finds himself and helps the Mets. Like, there's no incentive to trade Brett Baty when there's no value, when you're not getting any value back. Like, I guarantee you Stearns probably said, I'll give you Brett Baty for Hunter Harvey. Maybe they don't want that. Maybe the Mets weren't willing to do that. Maybe the Royals X for Brett Baty or somebody like that of that ilk. But the Mets are trying to shed the Marte money a little bit and get him off the roster. So again, if it doesn't benefit the Mets to trade Baty and a team is not willing to give you anything of value, why trade Baty? He's probably more beneficial in your system at this point, because if he has a good spring, maybe the Mets can get a better bullpen arm then. And teams would be like, oh, okay. So unless the Mets are going to get something back in return, it's no point in trading Baty, because it's more beneficial to keep him in the minors or find a spot for him on this team and he performs. That's the only thing I can think of, Chris.
Yeah. No, I agree. You're 100% right.
All right, guys. So a long episode 29 of Mets Hot Stove, 2.5 hours, and nothing happened. How about that? So you got our faces and our voices for 2.5 hours, and nothing happened for the New York Mets. A lot of what ifs, a lot of who's, but not a lot of, oh, we got him. So hopefully we have a long stream when we actually get somebody. But as of right now, Pete Alonso's not still signed. Bregman's not still signed. Flaherty's not still signed. Profar. A lot of options still out there. What will the Mets do? We'll find out hopefully very soon. Thank you for tuning in to episode 29 of Mets Hot Stove. Hit that like button. Subscribe to the channels, guys. And we'll see you next time on the Mets Hot Stove Show. Have a good night, guys. Let's go, Mets. Good night.
Let's go, Mets.
Dead at night, full of echo. Concrete jungle, dreams bust to grow. Mets in the air, chase glory, no fear. Broken backs, but hearts steer clear. OMG, the chaos, what a scene. Streets buzzing like a machine. Grimace from the shadows, chills on my spine. Past haunts, the future shine. Come